Proposition 1. Time is eternal, and no span of time ever spun that itself was not preceded by an infinite span of time. Proposition 2. There has never been a first second, nor will there ever be a last year, and all we have ever measured or will ever measure only equates to a single point along the eternal line of time. Proposition 3. An infinite span of time preceded the direct chain of events we call our Big Bang, and an infinite span of time shall pass after the last footprints that our species or planet ever existed have long since faded away. Proposition 4. There is no largest measurement of time, nor is there a smallest measurement of time. It is the laws of physics that dictate what is relative within our visible patch of space-time. Proposition 5. Our most precious commodity, one we can only borrow but never buy, and something very few people going to the grave ever feel they got enough of, is time itself. Proposition 6. Space is infinite, and no span of space was ever spawned that itself was not preceded in all three spatial dimensions by an infinite span of space in every direction. Proposition 7. There was no first light second, nor will there ever be a last light year, and all we have ever measured or will ever measure is just a point in an infinitely eternal 4D Minkowski spacetime. Proposition 8. There is no largest span of space, nor is there a smallest measurement of space or distance. It is the laws of physics that dictate what is relative within our visible patch of spacetime. Proposition 9. The universe is composed of an infinite number of separate points hurling through space, each relative at any point in time to some finite number of other points, also hurling through space. Proposition 10. We know far more about what happened after recombination than we will ever know with any certainty about the period before recombination. When we remove the assumption made over a century ago of a hot, dense center from our models and focus only on the observational evidence we have accumulated, it seems to me that many of our inconsistencies and paradoxes all seem to elegantly disappear. Proposition 11. To grasp the natural state of nature, one must shed the last shreds of their Earth-centricity and realize our planet is not special, and our species is not special, and we are just one life form on one big wet rock out of hundreds of quadrillions of big wet rocks in just our tiny, infinitesimal relative patch of spacetime. Proposition 12. When we take the time to examine the equations of general relativity and special relativity, we find there are unlikely, eternally inflating bubble universes. Instead, if we remove the assumption made a century ago of a hot, dense center, and instead just focus on the data, we find a nested succession of parent co-moving frames of reference. Proposition 13. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. And this fact has been well proven. Likewise, at every moment in time, your direct perception of time is based on all the overlapping gravity wells you pass through as you traverse your own unique line of time. Also, an established fact. Proposition 14. Velocity and gravity together dictate each of our perceptions of both time and space. But our complete perception of both time and space is also directly related to the succession of parent co-moving frames of reference that we are part of. Proposition 15. All bodies sharing the same relative trajectory and relative velocity would experience the same base perception of both time and space. Each co-moving frame of reference, which at times may appear as an inertial reference frame, according to the formulas for time dilation and length contraction, would all share the same base perception of time and space. Proposition 16. Co-moving frames of reference inherit their base perception of time and space from their most direct parent co-moving frame of reference, which gets its perception of time and space from its parent co-moving frame of reference. And this continues upwards with each larger parent co-moving frame of reference, providing a base perception of time and space to all the siblings moving as a cohesive body. Proposition 17. Each of us acts as a co-moving frame of reference to the trillions of cells that join us daily on our journey that have our own DNA, and the trillions of cells that join us daily on our journey that do not have our own DNA. Each of us is a pocket of space-time, offering a base perception of time and space to all those cells and other atoms traversing space-time along with us, fully dependent at any moment in time on the most direct parent frame of reference we are riding. Proposition 18. Most of us at any moment of time could say they are riding the rotation of our planet as their most direct parent frame of reference, while others may be in a car, plane, boat, train, on top of an animal or other mechanical device that is moving at some different speed than everyone else, planted on the planet. Each of those technically are separate pockets of space-time, and if sustained long enough, their effects will become measurable. Proposition 19. Time is hereditary, and every co-moving frame of reference acquires its base perception of time from its direct parent co-moving frame of reference. This occurs naturally in succession due to the way general relativity causes all celestial bodies to play the eternal game of follow the leaders. Proposition 20. Our universe is an infinite playground of celestial objects, all trying to play follow the leader in a nested succession. All we can see are just rungs on a ladder, with no empirical reason to suspect those rungs would not continue beyond what we can see, creating larger and larger co-moving frames of reference. Proposition 21. Within each co-moving frame of reference, each body, or gravitationally bound group of bodies, has their base perception of both time and space uniquely adjusted based on their relative velocities inside their parent frame of reference and all gravitational fields they pass through as they move along with all their siblings in a shared co-moving orbit around some more massive structures. Proposition 22. Celestial siblings sharing a co-moving frame of reference, playing follow the leaders, each experience their own unique line segment of time because they each pass through a slightly different tensor mesh of overlapping gravity wells, impacting their base perception, while their separate relative velocities within their shared co-moving frame of reference further refine their base perception. Proposition 23. This Russian nesting doll approach to grasping the true nature of time, space, and the universe is all based on accepting a simple proposition: no first second. That one almost poetic statement is self-evident and sufficient to build an explanation for existence that sees many of the most pressing issues in physics unravel cleanly at our feet, using simple, classical relativistic physics, while eliminating the paradoxes associated with alternative explanations for reality. Proposition 24. Each co-moving frame of reference creates a pocket of space-time, post, in a nested succession. So one could say our post with a capital P represents the largest measurable co-moving frame of reference that our current scientific precision makes possible, What I call our post with a capital P can be thought of as our universe with a lowercase u. And the universe with an uppercase U is the aggregate collection of the infinite other pockets of nested co-moving frames of reference. Proposition 25. Our visible universe with a lowercase u, our post, is made from an ever-changing finite number of separate relative nested pockets of spacetime. Pockets full of mass and energy and heat and radiation. Our universe, with a capital U, is made from an infinite number of separate nested pockets of relative pressurized space-time, mass, energy, heat, radiation. That is what reality is made from, and is the simplest way to truly express the natural state of nature. Proposition 26. For those who may not realize it, our moon is slowly moving away from the Earth. But most all the planets are also slowly moving away from our sun, and many of them will also slowly see the orbits of many of their moons increase over time. No orbit can contain infinite energy, so all orbits must eventually decay one way or the other. Proposition 27. Our sun and all the stars in the outer arms of the Milky Way galaxy are slowly moving away from Sagittarius A star, the black hole at the center of our galaxy. The outer arms of most all galaxies are slowly moving away from their centers and will slowly disperse over time. Proposition 28. Our galaxy and the many dwarf galaxies sharing its co-moving frame of reference, along with other galaxies in our local group, orbit a shared barycenter, and the diameters of the orbits of all the siblings of our local galactic cluster are also increasing over time. Proposition 29. Our local group of galaxies is indirectly orbiting the Great Attractor, and someday, when we have collected sufficient evidence, it will be shown that our orbit around the Great Attractor also has an increasing radius. Proposition 30. The Great Attractor is likely orbiting the Shapley Attractor, or the two may be orbiting a shared barycenter, and their respective orbits are likely also increasing in diameter over time. We may never see what that pair orbits, but the current empirical evidence points to them not being stationary, and instead likely hurling through space, orbiting something even more massive, dragging our entire supercluster along for the ride. Proposition 31. Getting tired of perpetually playing follow the leaders is what general relativity tells us to expect in a nested succession. However, it also dictates that when relative objects are too massive or moving at speeds that are either too fast or too slow, then instead of a stable co-moving frame of reference, we get either an escape velocity reaching orbital ejection or a downward spiral into a violent merger. Proposition 32. Most orbits generally lose energy over time and diameters increase, and mass energy cohesion holding space-time together loosens. The overlapping gravity wells at many different scale factors in a nested succession all see an average loss in the tensor mesh strength of gravitational attraction, binding them together as pockets of spacetime. Proposition 33. Something very interesting happens once you realize where time and space are coming from. It becomes simple physics then to understand where the cause of what we call dark energy is coming from. What happens when the perception of space-time offered by the nested succession of overlapping gravity wells sees their localized mass energy cohesion to space-time slowly dissipate over time? Question mark. Proposition 34. What would that look like as you peer down into the nested succession of parent co-moving frames of reference, each feeding their children a nested perception of time and space? where most rungs each see an average dissipation of localized mass energy cohesion to relative spacetime. It would look to us at our scale factor like the very fabric of space and time itself was being torn apart. It would look exactly like the effects that we attribute to dark energy. Proposition 35. We can already see where local relative gravity counteracts dark energy. So it seems obvious there is a constant battle between all the local relative overlapping gravity wells inside our largest measurable pocket of spacetime and something. That something is the succession of larger and larger pockets of overlapping gravity wells, each seeing, on average, an increasing diameter for the majority of all the orbits making up those overlapping gravity wells. That is why lambda, inside the field equations of general relativity, needs to be expressed as a ratio, not a constant. Proposition 36. Vacuum energy has nothing to do with dark energy. The calculations that we failed more miserably at than any other scientific prediction ever should have made that crystal clear. Instead, what we would predict if there was in fact a slow dissipation of mass energy cohesion across a nested succession of co-moving frames of reference is a rate that increases exponentially. Proposition 37. Once the prediction of a rate of universal expansion increasing exponentially is confirmed, and that the rate of expansion varies in strength across our local patch of spacetime due to areas of stronger overlapping localized gravity wells, and no other theory has come along to explain dark energy any better, then William of Ockham would endorse the concepts of nested pockets of spacetime and successive collision theory. Proposition 38. In my humble opinion, it is foolishly premature to pretend that we have collected sufficient information to make a truly informed decision about the underlying natural state of nature behind our cosmos until our current calendar year has 5 digits in it. And we are closer to 6 digits than 4. Just as we should not pretend that our entire 13.8 billion-year-old universe is not still in its infancy. If we thought about the life of our entire universe like the life cycle of any mammal, it is not yet even a recognizable fetus. Proposition 39. When our year has 9 digits in it, then we might begin to see the start of the eventual transformation of our web of cosmic filaments into a more defined, nested structure of co-moving frames of reference. But that metamorphosis could take hundreds of quadrillions of years. Proposition 40. Over the next 420 quadrillion years, Laniakea and Shapley may become a gravitationally bound spheroid, even though current evidence points towards them spreading apart. Gravity can work over great distances in ways we do not yet fully grasp, as seen in the outer arms of many galaxies spreading out as slowly as they do. And we may not yet truly appreciate how dark matter, at large scales, may help fight off dark energy when the primary attractors are themselves hurling through spacetime. Proposition 41. Our largest measurable co-moving frame of reference, our visible universe, would in fact have an approximate center. However, since we will unlikely ever locate the outer edges, this almost certain fact, treated by many as mere speculation, might never be proven, at least not by our species. Proposition 42. Our entire visible universe and the co-moving parts beyond our visible horizon that are gravitationally bound have an approximate center of mass, approximate axis of rotation, period of rotation, magnetic field, electric field, gravitational field, a period of revolution, possibly one or more satellites, and within its parent frame of reference would have some average luminosity, average thermal signature, approximate relative trajectory, and an approximate relative velocity. Proposition 43. There are habitable planets on the very edges of our visible universe that could see an almost pitch-black night sky in one direction and a normal night sky in the other. Some of the possibly trillions of planets that are in edge-of-universe galaxies, if lucky, might see one or more of our pocket's siblings, far off and faint like a distant star. Just as entire galaxies can look like a distant star, without sufficient resolution and exposure, so would entire universes like ours appear to their distant siblings. Proposition 44. All the evidence of what general relativity has shown happens inside our visible patch of spacetime, when extrapolated against infinite space, indicates a clear picture of how our universe is likely structured beyond the horizon we can never see past, offering a far more elegant answer to creation than extrapolating a single hot, dense center that once held all the mass and energy of the entire universe inside a pea until it fluctuated at quantum scales with unfathomable heat, inflated faster than light, and created cold dark matter. Proposition 45. Anyone who claims to have proof of the hot, dense center of the Big Bang is in fact referring to a model that is held together by Band-Aids, unable to explain more mysteries than it seems able to solve. It offers a very detailed, almost plausible explanation from mere fractions of a second after some event happened, and has been constantly adjusting theory to help fit square pegs into round holes for over a century, all due to an assumption that once made sense. Proposition 46. What we do know is that there was a period of cooling, possibly hundreds or thousands of years, where stray electrons and random nuclei cooled to about 3,000 Kelvin, atoms could begin to form, and photons could begin to move freely. Let there be light rang out across our universe during a period of recombination. We know what happened, and we know about what evolved after it. But the absolute truth is that we do not yet have a good model that can match all our observations using a hot, dense center as the starting point. There is a feasible method of seeing Big Bangs happen. Proposition 47. Cosmic simulations like the Flamingo Project, CODAL, Thesan, Uchu, Illustris, Deuce, Horizon Runs 2 and 3, Sibelius Dark, Eagle, Millennium, and others could benefit from removing the assumption of a hot dense center from their code. Those simulations that don't start from a hot dense center, but instead only rely on data collected from the CMB forward, then apply good physics on top of that, and then continue to zoom out, will eventually be able to replicate Big Bangs. Relative impacts of random collisions between immense nested pockets of spacetime leaves many universes like ours in their wakes. Proposition 48. If time is eternal and space is infinite, then occasionally two immense nested successions of co-moving frames of reference cross paths where the kinetic energies of the collisions that occur potentially reach or exceed twice the speed of light. Proposition 49. Our cosmic speed limit is based on our succession of relative co-moving frames of reference. The relative speeds involved when two immense pockets far removed from our scale factor intersect could potentially far exceed twice the speed of light. The physics behind those types of superluminal collisions is what turns mass back into hot, dense, swirling plasma energy. Proposition 50. There are so many separate inconsistencies and unanswered questions surrounding the current lambda CDM model that are answered by successive collision theory with simple elegance, using just the math of general and special relativity. It offers not only a better explanation for what we observe around us, but also a better explanation for the catalyst that caused our Big Bang to occur in the first place. Proposition 51. When we don't rely on a century-old assumption of a hot dense center, but instead start with a relative field of initial collisions much closer in size to our initial CMB than to a P, then early mature galaxies, early massive black holes, and even stars older than our visible patch of spacetime are no longer mysteries, but become predictions. Another prediction would to someday see a blue shifted galaxy appear on the cosmic horizon. Proposition 52. Rather than invoking faster-than-light inflation to answer the horizon problem, it is faster-than-light collisions that helps explain where the fairly uniform temperature of our CMB came from. Proposition 53. When we change the approximate starting area from something smaller than a P to between 70% to 80% the approximate size that the CMB was during recombination, then instead of 380,000 years of cooling, we may only need 380,000 weeks of cooling to see an average mean temperature uniformly approach 3,000 Kelvin. Proposition 54. Our CMB did not form instantaneously, but over a period of time. What we call anomalies in the CMB are based on how long that area took to reach a temperature where nuclei could finally begin capturing electrons, atoms were forming, and photons could travel freely. Since that did not happen all at the exact same moment in time, we would predict subtle anomalies, and the fact that it seems so uniform is predicted when there is an expectation of similar amounts of kinetic energy being released across a large patch of spacetime. Proposition 55. It seems almost ironic that we call the period of time where electrons could begin to orbit nuclei and atoms could form the period of recombination. One might think that if our human brains really meant to call our Big Bang a starting point for everything and claim there was actually a first moment in time, then we would have called it a period of combination, not recombination. By calling it recombination, we already basically accept the probability that the hot swirling energy that our universe was created from was previously mass. Proposition 56. Two immense intersecting nested pockets of mass and energy will see an overwhelming number of the initial collisions occur with very similar degrees of kinetic energy, turning colliding mass into heat, light, and swirling plasma radiation. The multitude of secondary and tertiary collisions would have also been occurring with similar relative degrees of kinetic energy to spread that heat and plasma fairly uniformly across our cosmic web of superfilaments and supervoids, which began forming before the CMB. Proposition 57. Superclusters like Laniakea do not look like mass expelled at faster-than-light speeds from some dense center, but do look like the remnants of successive collisions. So many current problems that our best simulations struggle with will disappear when they tweak the parameters of what we might predict would happen during superluminal collisions and remove the assumption of a hot, dense central singularity. Proposition 58. Multiple successive collisions at relative speeds at or above twice the speed of light, happening across a large area of nearby spacetime with two separate specific sets of relative trajectories and two separate sets of specific relative velocities, would be predicted to create supervoids, slowly rotating massive filaments with cross strands, multiple types of different galaxies, many galaxies that appear to rotate at the same rate, many galaxies that appear to host a quasar with a similar relative inclination of their axis, approximate 50-50 split across all three spatial dimensions in rotational directions of galaxies, and a clear explanation for why we have far more matter than antimatter. Proposition 59. Multiple successive collisions with the kinetic energy associated with superluminal velocities across a large area of relative spacetime with similar relative trajectories and relative velocities would be predicted to have uniform temperatures across a large area of spacetime, a huge range of different starting densities of swirling hot plasma, embedded inside slowly rotating filaments that branch out, and a prediction that many separate galaxies would share the same relative starting momentum and thus show similar rates of rotation billions of years later. Huge rings and arcs left over from BAOs, created from collisions, would have no specific expected size limits. Proposition 60. One possibility is that within any two separate nested co-moving frames of reference, the fastest possible internal relative velocity could be the speed of light. So when any two pockets intersect, the highest possible kinetic energy release would be equivalent to collisions occurring at twice the speed of light. The other possibility is that collisions could have occurred with the kinetic energy equivalent of collisions at 8, 42, or 67 times the speed of light. Pockets with huge numbers of nested levels, tens or hundreds of thousands of rungs, could easily see collisions surpass double the cosmic limit. Proposition 61. This planet has unlikely ever seen a divine miracle, nor are we here because of fate. This world's first miracle would be our species flourishing 200, 2,000, and 2 million years from now. We are headed down a path of self-destruction, and only major changes in how this world runs is going to save us. But if that miracle happened, and we did become interstellar travelers, then I predict someday we will find some asteroid or meteor, or maybe even some moon, that is confirmed to be far older than the possible oldest age of our universe. That would be final proof for successive collision theory. Proposition 62. If there was light from a galaxy that was heading towards us at the time of our initial collision at superluminal speeds, and over the last 14 billion some odd years it had been getting redshifted, could we someday see a galaxy come into focus beyond the farthest conceivable Z redshift out of nowhere? If so, then it was predicted here first. In particular, if somehow we could determine it is actually blue shifted first. Proposition 63. There are unknown anomalies in the cosmos like fast optical blue transients and red transients. If our universe was still seeing visitors pass through our localized spacetime that originated from some other nested succession of co-moving frames of reference, then we would predict the potential exists for our universe to receive foreign, faster-than-light celestial bodies that could be asteroids, moons, planets, stars, or black holes. When a body in motion receives its momentum from an external nested succession of co-moving frames of reference, it is not breaking any laws of physics if it passes through our universe at faster-than-light speeds. Proposition 64. If the Vasco project received enough volunteers, we could potentially someday find a succession of red transients being created in sequence. And with accurate distance calculations, we can in turn calculate the relative velocity of the object that traversed through a nebulous gas cloud, igniting pockets of gas for brief periods. If that motion appears to be caused by a superluminal object, it would be solid evidence to support successive collision theory. Proposition 65. A head-on collision between a superluminal visitor and a large celestial object would be predicted to release massive amounts of energy very quickly, and could be a feasible explanation for some of the otherwise unexplainable, non-repeating high-energy optical blue transients and high-energy gamma-ray bursts that we have encountered. Proposition 66. If we did someday happen to catch a sequence of red transients igniting and were able to calculate the relative velocity and trajectory of the body causing them, there is a small, almost impossible chance that we could predict that trajectory forward until a collision occurs or it passes close enough to something where its effects could be measured. This would be a long shot beyond long shots, but a prediction of where and when a fast blue optical transient will appear based on a trajectory calculated from red transients would be significant evidence to validate successive collision theory as the proper successor to our outdated lambda CDM Big Bang model. Proposition 67. During the initial era of our Big Bang's primary, secondary, and tertiary superluminal collisions, it is predicted they would occur with random degrees of impact, while there should exist some tendency towards similar initial angles of impact. If we do find someday many distant quasars share a similar relative axis of inclination, or many separate spiral galaxies have a similar relative inclination of their galactic planes, that would lend further credence to successive collision theory. Proposition 68. One of those random degrees of impacts would be minor glances, which would see the majority of an object continue on, but conservation of momentum could leave a fast, hot, swirling plasma cloud behind. Collisions that occur head-on would see the greatest conversion of kinetic energy directly into hot, dense plasma energy. Those in between would see some amount of kinetic energy converted into the angular momentum of the swirling plasma cloud, and not just into heat and light and plasma. Proposition 69. Most galaxies were born with an initial angular momentum, and some of the dense centers that quickly became black holes may have started as leftover remnants, thus more massive than all the dense cooling dust and plasma, and able to attract nearby matter very quickly until their respective Schwarzschild radii was reached. The hot, dense energy plasma, even before it became baryons or atoms, would still be drawn in towards fast-growing dense centers, and supermassive black holes of all different sizes should exist at the center of most galaxies. Proposition 70. No laws of physics are broken when two immense, separate, nested, co-moving frames intersect at 16 or 42 times the speed of light. It either caps at twice the speed of light, which is possible, or it could go much higher. With nearly head-on superluminal collisions, the potential exists for a release of energy so hot and dense that when it cools, the amount of mass we end up with is greater than the combined masses of the two bodies that collided. It breaks the laws of physics to accelerate something with mass inside the observer's frame of reference to the speed of light. But no laws are broken if something enters the observer's frame of reference going at or faster than the speed of light. Proposition 71. Our current best guess claims all the mass in our visible universe was once inside a singularity. Although it is possible a single superluminal collision between two black holes may have been the catalyst that forged our pocket of space-time. I am certain that no singularities were involved. Singularities exist only on paper and in formula, but do not manifest in the physical realm. Proposition 72. When two inconceivably large nested successions of co-moving frames of reference find their paths randomly intersect, it would be rare that they would have the same relative velocities within their shared parent frame of reference. One of them would normally be moving relatively faster, and the other relatively slower. If that was true, then we should be able to decipher in the cosmic web where many first collisions took place, and if so, then possibly the approximate average trajectory of the faster-moving pocket. Proposition 73. The first initial superluminal collisions that occur head-on, where mass is nearly instantaneously vaporized into hot, swirling plasma, would see one of the two masses push through and continue on its trajectory, albeit a little slower, even if it's pure plasma in motion at faster-than-light speeds. As it slows down and/or cools, we would predict strands to branch off, and then as they cool even further, for smaller substrands to branch off. Proposition 74. Cosmic filaments and supercluster strands would have widths that would be related to the original masses of the colliding objects, while their lengths would be related to the original relative velocities of those masses, with most of those initial collisions having similar trajectories at the moment of contact. There should be a discernible pattern in first collisions hidden within our cosmic web. Proposition 75. The brightest points of each supercluster and the brightest cosmic filaments would on average be the points of initial collisions where mass is likely to be denser. The densest galactic, not stellar nurseries, could be first collision points, while other bright branch points in superclusters could be secondary and tertiary collisions. Proposition 76. Similarly bright and dense tentacle-like strands would be caused naturally by fast-flowing energy with retained angular momentum swirling off as little eddies and branching off. Branching could happen if we had a superluminal flow of swirling plasma, because eddies could create electric and magnetic fields, and then repulsion or attraction could cause the eddies to slow down and branch off. Those eddies are the very first moment where nested co-moving frames of reference begin to reshape another pocket of space-time. Proposition 77. It would be interesting to see if galactic rotations followed a similar direction if they appear to be part of a supercluster's substrands. If so, that might be another testable prediction of successive collision theory. Not all substrands would follow that rule, but in theory, many should, while fewer would be the result of post-tertiary collisions. Proposition 78. If the initial collisions did happen with kinetic energies far beyond twice the speed of light, then branches could be the result of an initial collision vaporizing mass into a state of matter we don't even know about, and being carried forward by the more forceful partner as a stream of hot dense energy. It could then, in theory, have separate branch points as it slowed down before it even hit the speed of light, and then final branch points where it slowed down to the speed of light. Not sure if this would be considered theoretical or hypothetical, but I guess that depends on how well received the rest of the propositions end up. Proposition 79. Spiral galaxies are how almost all galaxies likely first form. The leftover angular momentum of some prior succession of collisions leaves hot, swirling balls of hydrogen and helium, potentially dusted with all sorts of remnant gas or dust, hurling through space. Then the field equations of the general theory of relativity turns that ball first into a disk, hurling through space, and then into a nested succession of co-moving frames of reference, each hurling through space-time, playing follow the leaders. Proposition 80. The cosmic web, great arc, great walls, superclusters, slowly rotating superfilaments, supervoids, and vast areas between filaments are all predicted by successive collision theory. Early mature galaxies, early massive black holes, random galactic density distributions, and dwarf satellite densities would all be predicted. With SCT, we also get remnants of a cosmic microwave background and baryonic acoustic oscillations, with the majority of all mass being converted first into a hot, dense plasma, then cooling into energetic electrons and hot deuterium and alpha particles first, before finally recombining back into atoms. Proposition 81. Someday our best simulations will remove the assumption of a hot, dense center and begin investigating the complexities and nuances of superluminal collisions. If ever a task was invented that would put a real quantum computer to good use, it would be to try all different parameters to successive superluminal collisions until it could come across one or two possible scenarios that vaguely resemble the parts of our universe we can still see. This is where AI could extrapolate potential physics we have no way to ever test. Proposition 82. Early supermassive black holes and galaxy distributions of all different sizes and densities would be predicted and easy to explain when random chaos ensued as potentially two dense stellar nurseries passed through each other at 8 or 80 times the speed of light and left our visible patch of space-time behind in their wake. Proposition 83. If it turns out that leftover angular momentum from collisions is responsible for some amount of the current remaining rotation energy, then it would be predicted for some large number of spiral galaxies of all different sizes to share a similar rate of rotation if the initial kinetic energy of the collisions were all similar. Proposition 84. When we apply the lens-thirring effect not just to massive black holes, but to all of the overlapping gravity wells making up a galaxy, then we should not be so surprised that star systems along the outer edges are able to spread out from the center as slowly as they appear to. Overlapping gravity wells form a tensor mesh of gravitational attraction. Proposition 85. Our universe is considered flat, which means there is no discernible curvature, and a triangle made of any size between galaxies will always see the internal angles add up to 180 degrees. Proposition 86. If our visible universe was found to have curvature, it would not mean we live in a torus or a saddle. It would only mean that our patch of space-time was inside the gravity well of a far more massive structure. Proposition 87. Local curvature to our relative patch of space-time does not dictate the shape of the entire eternal and infinite universe. It would just indicate our entire visible pocket of space-time was likely orbiting something much more massive. Proposition 88. When we toggle the assumption at the core foundation of almost all disciplines of science and relegate a finite universe to speculation and promote an eternally infinite universe to premise, then little by little we can see nearly all the current mysteries and paradoxes of science unravel ever so elegantly at our feet. Proposition 89. It was a mistake to assume we discovered anything elementary because it was a bold assumption to make in the first place that we are even capable of seeing anything elementary. Proposition 90. When we remove the assumption that our standard model of particles are elementary, then it becomes obvious how mass and energy below quantum scales would cause quantum weirdness to disappear in favor of classical relativistic physics. Proposition 91. We lack the scientific precision because the laws of physics dictate the limits of what we can see. But if that issue was removed, we would see there is a superdeterministic sequence of subquantum states that produce each quantized quantum state. Proposition 92. We would predict superposition, tunneling, and a probabilistic wave function if subquantum interactions we can't see were causing aggregations of random attractions and repulsions at subquantum scales to manifest as all the quantum fields of our standard model, and a reason why particles in motion randomly deviate from their predicted paths. Proposition 93. If there was a subquantum realm far smaller than the electron neutrino, in abundance far greater than neutrinos, it would explain vacuum energy, virtual particles, the need for renormalization, the reason for wave-particle duality, the reason for a probabilistic wave function, and a logical premise to explain how space-time can bend and warp in the presence of mass. Proposition 94. Finally admitting we were premature to claim we located anything elementary will pry open the doors previously shut by our presumptuous assumption. Aggregations of subquantum waves in phase can become virtual particles or vacuum energy, and if dense enough, then they become quantum particles. They would also be responsible for tiny repulsions and attractions we can't see, which is why we have superposition. Proposition 95. At the onset of quantum mechanics, an assumption was made that created a century of mysticism. We saw an interference pattern where we did not expect one that disappears upon closer inspection, and knew that at the core, a particle in motion moves as a wave. Yet we then question which slit the particle went through. A foolish question to ask in the first place, since if it were traveling as a particle, there would be no interference pattern at all. Proposition 96. The assumption was made that a wave of energy spreading out would not be able to manifest as a particle at the point it is needed. Yet that assumption could easily be wrong. Energy returned to the subquantum realm where not needed, and pulled from the subquantum realm where needed in order to abide by the laws of the conservation of energy and conservation of momentum, could explain how a particle in motion as an expanding wave of energy arrives at its destination intact as a particle. Proposition 97. We guessed what it meant for a particle to become a particle, and a century of mysticism with spooky action at a distance is what we have to show for it. A particle becomes a particle when the macro worlds of physics, electromagnetism, chemistry, biology, or thermodynamics, among other disciplines, dictates the need for a particle at a specific point in relative spacetime. Otherwise, like all other energy and motion in every other wave, it moves in all four dimensions of space-time. Proposition 98. Aggregations of tiny subquantum waves in phase would occasionally manifest at our quantum scale factors, and we see this as measurable vacuum energy. When the underlying density is sufficient, or the number of these subquantum waves in phase is large enough, then we see a particle in one of our quantum fields. What we call excitations in a quantum field are just aggregations of subquantum waves in phase, and stable ones become particles, while unstable ones are relegated to virtual particles and vacuum energy. Proposition 99. Aggregations of tiny subquantum waves in phase, not yet of an intensity to excite one of our quantum fields, could still cause subquantum attractions and repulsions that would be predicted to cause other waves of polarized energy and motion at our quantum scales to deviate from their predicted paths. A probabilistic wave function is a prediction of a subquantum realm. Superposition and tunneling are the repercussions of those subquantum interactions beyond our purview. Proposition 100. It is incorrect to believe that superposition means that a particle is in two places at the same time. A particle is not a particle until that energy in motion needs particle-like properties in order for the sciences of our macro world to function. Before then, it is not a particle in multiple spots, but an expanding wave of energy, flowing like every other wave, trying to explore all four dimensions. Proposition 101. There is a basic building block that is the foundation of all other building blocks, and understanding the mechanics of what that is and how it works can help unlock the true basic force that governs all other forces. A way to unite all forces under one physical law by understanding the basic building block of existence. Proposition 102. The basic building block that makes up all mass is tiny waves of energy. Waves of energy that become particles when the macro world determines a particle is needed. Waves of energy constantly being deviated from their path due to random subquantum interactions. The wave is the basic building block of all existence. Wave mechanics underlie all other physical sciences. Proposition 103. There are no point strings nor point particles, just waves of energy made up from the aggregations of even smaller waves of energy in phase. Proposition 104. Chirality and symmetry breaking, to explain how forces work, are oversimplifications of far less intuitive internal dynamics. To grasp how beta decay can see down quarks emit electrons when both are elementary further reinforces how aggregations of subquantum energy of specific densities and frequencies can manifest as either long-lived particles or very short-lived particles. Proposition 105. Waves can be considered energy in motion, and energy in motion at many different scale factors almost always moves in some form of wave. The core energy of the wave, or strength, is carried by the amplitude, while the frequency dictates the overall density of that strength, and together produce the total energy throughput of every wave. Proposition 106. Every wave requires a medium in order to function, and it was a bold assumption made by science long ago that we could have a non-mechanical wave when everything we knew about wave mechanics told us otherwise. Proposition 107. The fact that the oscillation between magnetic and electric fields can be shown via formula to dictate how electromagnetic radiation can propagate does not specifically negate the presence of an underlying medium, in particular when considering the abundance of evidence for a subquantum realm. Proposition 108. When the amplitude of a wave increases, the energy carried by the wave increases exponentially, not linearly. When there are many waves in phase, the aggregate density causes an increase in amplitude of the combined waves in phase, thus increasing the overall energy carried by the wave. Proposition 109. All mechanical waves, including electromagnetic radiation, that see an increase in amplitude directly correlates to a larger deviation from an equilibrium state of that medium. It is that deviation from an equilibrium state that allows a wave to carry energy through that medium. Proposition 110. The reason that every force has an equal and opposite reaction, and the reason why we can use the equivalence principle to understand the cause of gravity, is because every medium strives to be at its lowest energy state. Every medium is always working towards returning to its equilibrium state. That is what allows the wave to carry the energy in the first place. Proposition 111. The effort needed to move mass at our quantum scale factor through the subquantum medium is equal to the effects that the subquantum medium places upon our spacetime and its objects. Gravity is a subquantum interaction where the medium of spacetime is tugging back on the displacements caused by mass. Proposition 112. Every wave always attempts to move in all four dimensions. I will repeat that. Every wave always attempts to move in all 4 dimensions. Time is obvious, and it has no choice there. But all energy in motion is always trying to move through time across all 3 spatial dimensions. And where there is no medium in any dimension, a wave ceases to move. Proposition 113. Where there is any medium, each wave will strive to spread out in all 3 dimensions as it moves through time, and each medium presents a different level of resistance. On each successive wavelength that extends that wave 1 unit further, it reduces the amplitude of the wave by an amount dictated by the resistance met in that medium. Proposition 114. Throw a rock into a still pond and we see ripples across the top with slowly decreasing amplitudes. But there would also be a wave front felt underwater for some distance, just as sound waves spread through the air for some distance, until their amplitudes are too low to be heard. Light waves show that event to observers, but diminish in intensity over distance. Intensity and amplitude are directly proportional. Proposition 115. Because all energy moves in waves, the single force that drives all other forces is the attempt of every medium to return to its equilibrium or lowest energy state. That is why light always takes the shortest path and why the path of least action works so beautifully. This is an open challenge to the physicists and mathematicians of the world to help show how the 4 known forces can each be reduced down to a single law of nature. Proposition 116. One could say that entropy is the end goal of all mediums, attempting to reach their equilibrium states or lowest energy states. Positive and negative seek to be neutral, just as hot and cold seek to be warm, or dense and sparse try to both redistribute equally. The driving force behind all other forces is nature's attempt to return to its most natural state. Proposition 117. The grand unification of forces won't happen once we bring gravity into the fold and unite with quantum mechanics. But when someday every force is proven to be caused by the natural tendency of all mediums to return to their lowest energy states of equilibrium. Proposition 118. A particle in motion is a collection of subquantum waves in phase moving together until the macro world dictates a quantum particle is needed. Before that, like all waves, they try to move in 3 spatial dimensions. Thus, a wave, not a particle, goes through multiple slits and stays in motion until the macro world dictates a quantum event needs to take place. Proposition 119. Over the last century, our greatest minds discussed things like the EPR paradox and spooky action at a distance based on interpretations of the collapse of the wave function. There was one proposition made that I feel was prematurely dismissed. Science dismissed the idea of a 3-dimensional wave of energy that can propagate through space-time but recoalesce at a point in space and time where and when a particle is needed. That dismissal may not have been warranted. Proposition 120. All the evidence points to a wave, not a particle, going through both slits, and instead of misrepresenting superposition to indicate a particle is in 2 places at once, we need to recognize that a particle is a collection of tiny waves of energy moving together and spreading out until the laws of physics or chemistry as we know them dictate a particle is needed. Proposition 121. If we accept that the laws of conservation of energy must be followed, then energy borrowed from the subquantum foam at the point a particle is required to manifest must be returned to the subquantum foam in an equal amount spread out across all the parts of the wave that ended up elsewhere. Proposition 122. There is no quantum weirdness because the collapse of the wave function holds no mystery. Entanglement is an easy-to-understand physical process directly governed by the laws of conservation. Every entangled property is due to a law of conservation, and that dictates that those properties must be set at the time a pair of particles becomes entangled. Proposition 123. When we accept the true nature of superposition, wave-particle duality, the role the subquantum realm plays in the probabilistic nature of quantum particles and the wave function collapse, then we see hidden variables must be correct. Our understanding of the wave function collapse was flawed, thus conclusions drawn from experiments supporting John Bell's inequality are flawed at the core. Proposition 124. To claim hidden variables are wrong means that a particle whose entangled partner is measured could have its own property, one previously already set, automatically reverse without any physical process acting upon it. The absurdity we created by dismissing the subquantum waves of energy able to manifest at a single point as a particle cast a century of mysticism over our scientific community. But the time is finally here to break free. Proposition 125. I realize that we gave out Nobel Prizes in 2022 that backed up the work of John Bell, but any experiment that claims to dismiss hidden variables, properties set at the time particles are created, entangled through the laws of conservation, are using a flawed assumption to base conclusions upon. Proposition 126. When we grasp that particles in motion are collections of tiny waves of energy and phase trying to spread out, able to coalesce at a specific point where the macro world dictates it needs a particle, then we end up with naturally occurring entanglement without any form of spooky action at a distance. Remove the assumption we found anything elementary, and the weirdness of quantum mechanics fades away. Proposition 127. Superposition does not mean a particle is in two places at the same time. It moves as a wave spreading out in spacetime, and subtle subquantum interactions, both repulsive and attractive, can guide where the macro world ends up seeing a particle. A probabilistic wave function is a prediction of a subquantum realm that creates our quantum fields and offers the elusive ether upon which electromagnetic waves can propagate upon. Proposition 128. If there was a subquantum realm of mass and energy far below the smallest scales we can measure, then another prediction would be that space-time would appear to bend and warp in the presence of mass. If it were not for mass below the scales we can measure, space-time would not be bending and warping due to gravity. Proposition 129. Our fine structure constant is due to the equilibrium state of relative mass-energy density across the relative density of our localized spacetime. The similarity between the fine structure constant and the golden angle golden ratios that we see through many separate evolutionary processes seeking to optimize growth potential seems to indicate that our subatomic scale factor coupling constants could potentially be a naturally occurring growth pattern. Proposition 130. The fine structure constant is often quoted as being very close to 1 over 137. The golden angle found all over nature is 137.5. The golden angle pops up throughout nature as growth patterns try to optimize naturally. So one meaning behind the fine structure constant could be a natural outcome of the growth patterns, not of life, but just nature, seeing co-moving frames of reference looking like waves in motion growing between the subquantum and quantum realms. Proposition 131. Seeing that the spacetime indices of the field equations of the general theory of relativity tensor matrix starts with time, it would be fair to say that time is in fact the first dimension, followed by three spatial dimensions. Proposition 132. No three-dimensional entity can truly claim existence unless it traverses its own unique line segment of time. To exist means to be measurable in no less than 4 dimensions. Proposition 133. The increase from a lower dimension to a higher dimension only occurs when a lower dimensional object intersects a new line of measurement and can be measured on at least 2 or more points along this new line of measurement. You cannot make up imaginary curled up dimensions without applying a specific measurement to each dimension. Proposition 134. First, the line of length intersects the length of time. Then the line of width intersects that two-dimensional object. And lastly, the line of height intersects that lower dimensional for every four-dimensional object to truly exist. Proposition 135. Any intersecting line of measurement where a lower dimensional object cannot be measured on more than a single point along that new line is indistinguishable from its lower dimensional self. Two or more points must be measurable along this intersecting line of measurement for an object to be able to be classified as a higher dimensional object. Proposition 136. If we cared to think about energy and mass as intersecting lines of measurement, then we are each six-dimensional objects. While including heat and other forms of radiation, we may be at least seven-dimensional and possibly even nine-dimensional. Proposition 137. Hidden curled-up dimensions and supersymmetry help string theory jump the shark. The math that explains how tiny waves of energy can vibrate to create the quantum fields of our standard model may offer a unique way to express reality mathematically, but that is as close as useful as string theory will ever get. Proposition 138. There are no point strings or point particles, but only the limits imposed by the laws of physics on the degree of relative scientific precision obtainable, where we can distinguish between the waves of energy in motion and the particle-like nature of our atomic building blocks that manifest when and where needed. Proposition 139. If nothing can move faster than light, and the instructions that gravity transmits across space-time arrive at the same time as light, then gravity can't be taking a straight line to get its instructions there. General relativity predicts both EM radiation and gravity to traverse space-time at the same constant rate. Proposition 140. Potentially, some as of yet unknown wavelength of electromagnetic radiation is responsible for the force carrier that lets mass dictate to spacetime where and when and how much to bend and warp. If the wavelength is at subquantum scales, we may never be able to properly measure the waves of gravitational attraction. Proposition 141. Gravitational waves of attraction are the force carriers of gravity, not the hypothetical particle we call the graviton. Gravity is a force that traverses spacetime to tell all different areas of spacetime not only how much to bend and warp, but where and when. Proposition 142. None of our planets orbit our sun. Our moon does not directly orbit our planet. Our moon orbits where our planet was 1.3 seconds ago, while each planet continually orbits different spots where our sun previously was. Proposition 143. Geodesics created by gravity wells can be impacted by other overlapping gravity wells and are themselves hurling through spacetime as an interconnected mesh of overlapping gravity wells. It is this mass-energy cohesion to spacetime that holds our local relative spacetime together and fights off the expansion caused by all of our nested parent co-moving frames of reference that are losing their own mass-energy cohesion to their own tensor meshes of overlapping relative gravity wells. Proposition 144. Each co-moving frame of reference has a tensor mesh of gravitational attraction where each point in relative co-moving space can see hundreds, thousands, even millions plus of separate relative tensor strengths tugging in all different directions. That mesh co-moves together with all the co-moving bodies themselves, and all combined behaves for the most part like an inertial reference frame. Proposition 145. Since few orbits are circular and most are elliptical, the chains going from perihelion to aphelion would involve some form of acceleration and deceleration. So our nested succession of parent co-moving frames of reference tells us there is no such thing as a true inertial frame of reference. There are only relative inertial frames of reference, which is ironic, since inertial reference frames are the cornerstone of relativity. Proposition 146. When we have a co-moving frame of reference, then multiple bodies would be sending out spherical waves of gravitational attraction, telling space-time where and when and by how much to bend and warp. Those waves, if they move in phase, could aggregate to see a larger amplitude, able to create a deeper gravity well along the areas of space-time where those waves provide instruction to. Proposition 147. If we consider that multiple stress-energy momentum tensors moving with the same relative trajectory and relative velocity could aggregate to produce deeper gravity wells than otherwise expected, we would predict to see galaxies held together that should otherwise fly apart. Proposition 148. If the attractive force of gravity moved as a wave and waves in phase increase the overall amplitude, then we would predict seeing areas where a gravitational lens provides a stronger effect than the reported mass predicts it should. Proposition 149. If there was no pea-sized hot dense center that we started from, but instead our cosmic web is the leftover trails of past superluminal collisions, then no dark matter is needed to account for the cosmic structures we see evolving today, and diffuse galaxies would be predicted to exhibit less dark matter. Proposition 150. Dark matter will not be found with macho wimps, but will be found as an aggregate function applied against the stress-energy momentum tensor in the field equations of the general theory of relativity. In total, 3 changes are needed to make general relativity complete. Proposition 151. Dark energy and dark matter may both be due to missing parameters inside the field equations of general relativity. A total of 3 changes to Einstein's field equations solves dark energy, dark matter, and the center of each black hole's event horizon. Proposition 152. First, dark energy is a variable ratio, capital lambda over lowercase lambda, comparing the strength of the localized overlapping gravity wells to the succession of nested overlapping gravity wells within each parent co-moving frame of reference at any point in time and space. Proposition 153. Secondly, dark matter might be an aggregate function applied to the stress-energy tensor to define the effects that multiple bodies sharing the same co-moving frame of reference can have on space-time. Proposition 154. Thirdly, we need to set a lower bound of 0.08 femtometers where the strong nuclear force takes over and gravity loses. Any energy expended by gravity to try to condense quarks past the limits of quark degeneracy pressure just end up creating more quarks. Proposition 155. There are no singularities at the center of black holes, but instead a polyquark or possibly a densely packed quark soup of constantly transforming quarks. For objects that appear to be so black, if we could see the quantum chromodynamics at the center of black holes, there is a chance it might be quite a vibrant color show. Proposition 156. All pockets of space-time have their own spheres of influence, multiple spheres that emanate outwards from each pocket. They can include thermal heat, visible light, sound, visible matter, gravitational attraction, magnetic attraction, electric fields, other radiation, odor, possibly even something we have not even learned about yet. Each emanates in waves that dissipate based on the resistance met, converting the amplitude into each additional wavelength. Proposition 157. The fact we have mass-energy cohesion to localize space-time, our web of relative overlapping gravity wells, our largest measurable segment of space-time, when applied against eternal time and infinite space, makes it statistically impossible for there not to be an infinite amount of mass, an infinite amount of energy. It becomes impossible, if space is infinite, to have mass here, but not everywhere. Proposition 158. Eternal time and infinite space begets an infinite number of separate planets, moons, and even asteroids, an infinite number of black holes, galaxies, stars, nebulas, cosmic jets, and other nested co-moving frames of reference with habitable planets at our scale factor across the vastness of an infinite universe, one that basic logic concludes must exist. Proposition 159. We know that gravity and magnetism are scale invariant and scale independent, and when we apply the field equations of general relativity against eternal time and infinite space, then instead of falsely envisioning any eternally inflating bubbles, except we are instead just one rung inside a nested succession of larger and larger co-moving frames of reference. Proposition 160. We shed our last shreds of our Earth-centricity when we accept that not only is our planet and galaxy nothing special, but neither is our local visible universe. All we can ever see or ever measure is little more than a single point in time and point in space. A speck of cosmic dust inside an infinite sea of cosmic dusts. What is relative to us is insignificant to the entire whole. Proposition 161. Most educated people able to grasp the number of galaxies and star systems within 100 billion light years of us take it for granted that even though we have yet to find proof of life, there is almost certainly an abundance of life out there to be found. Proposition 162. When we see life evolving at the deepest depths of the oceans or feeding off sulfuric acid living deep underground near thermal vents, and we wonder at the veracity of the tardigrade to survive, there is an almost certainty of life existing elsewhere within our finite little visible patch of space-time. If space is infinite, and there are an infinite number of celestial bodies, then it becomes statistically impossible for there not to be an infinite number of big wet rocks hosting multiple life forms. Thus, an infinite number with intelligent life capable of not just space travel, but empathy and compassion towards all living creatures. Proposition 163. When we accept eternal time and infinite space, then we must also accept infinite mass and infinite energy. It becomes statistically impossible for there to be mass and energy localized only within a single region of eternally infinite space-time, and must therefore exist in all directions, going on forever. Any concept of a finite boundary or edge introduces irreconcilable paradoxes. Proposition 164. Any other explanation for existence other than an eternally evolving universe invokes paradoxes and inconsistencies. So considering any other potential reality is what we should be labeling as speculation until there is proof that time is not eternal or space is not infinite. Proposition 165. Our entire visible universe truly is a point in time and a point in space. A point hurling through space and time, likely rotating and possibly in orbit, being orbited, or both. Relativity dictates what that point is relative to, and within that point, what is relative to it. Proposition 166. T0, as in the field equation space-time indices, is far different than T0 as it relates to our Big Bang's timeline. As it relates to the latter, the concept of T0 is to current cosmology what fool's gold is to prospecting. The idea there could be a first moment in time, blind to what relativity tells us about time, is not far off from thinking we live on a flat disk or that the sun revolves around the earth. Proposition 167. To grasp reality, one need only accept a few simple ideas, accept the field equations of the general theory of relativity as mostly accurate, applied alongside the formulas that come out of the special theory of relativity, like time dilation and space contraction, and apply them against the fabric of eternally infinite 4D Minkowski spacetime, and a single clear picture materializes. Proposition 168. It is statistically impossible for an infinite number of planets to only have a single big wet rock with life on it. And instead, when we have an infinite number of planets, it becomes statistically impossible for there not to be an infinite number of habitable planets. Proposition 169. These two contradictory statements can both be true. There are a finite number of different habitable planets. There are an infinite number of different habitable planets. That is because there are a finite number of unique combinations of elements that can support life. Too large and we get a star or brown dwarf. These finite number of different combinations of elements exist through an infinite number of separate iterations across space-time. Thus, both statements are technically true. Proposition 170. From the very first instant of our Big Bang to this exact moment right now, there has been a specific sequence of quantum states in succession. The number is incredibly, unfathomably huge, yet still finite. Proposition 171. Taking into account other life forms that may not be carbon-based, and grasping the true magnitude of some of the genomes we already know about, it might appear that there are an infinite number of possible life forms. However huge that number may be, it is still going to be a finite number of different ways you can combine elements to make something even remotely similar to DNA or RNA. Proposition 172. Therefore, there are a finite number of unique planets, moons, asteroids, and potentially even brown dwarfs with a finite number of unique life forms on them, going through an almost infinite number of different iterations for all eternity. That is the only paradox-free explanation for existence that is logically coherent with all existing observations. I added almost after giving this some thought, and if the number of parameters are finite, then the number of outcomes, no matter how large, must also be finite. Proposition 173. A multiverse is a statistical probability in excess of 99% likely when we examine the evidence with an open mind and logical framework. The tiny possibility that our relative Big Bang in fact created the entirety of all that exists inside an infinite spacetime, or that in some way time is not eternal or space is not infinite, is all far closer to 0% chance than even a 0.01% chance. Proposition 174. Anyone who doubts eternal time, infinite space, and an infinite number of times that your exact DNA is alive right now inside other pockets of relative spacetime is failing to shed their last shreds of Earth centricity. Shed away and be free to try to fully grasp the natural state of nature. However real a multiverse is, the way it is often portrayed is purely fictional. Proposition 175. When there is any succession of events that is known to occur once, we can be certain that every separate quantum state of those events is playing out right at this very moment an infinite number of times. It also means that every separate quantum state has also played out for all eternity an infinite number of times across an eternally infinite universe. Proposition 176. Not every scenario the mind can imagine must occur just because there are an infinite number of iterations of existence. Physical causality and a chain of possible causalities must both exist for any event to take place. Certain situations can be dreamed up that will never occur anywhere on any big wet rock. Proposition 177. There are no shared dreams or shared memories between doppelgangers. Deja vu is unrelated to the other copies of your DNA out there on other worlds, and your consciousness never leaves you or is ever shared with other copies of you. That is all pure fiction. For some of us, the distance to their next closest doppelganger could be outside our entire visible universe. Proposition 178. Somewhere across all eternally infinite space-time, there is a maximum age that your DNA will ever reach. Every single moment of your life, from inception up to that oldest maximum age you will ever reach, has been occurring for all eternity and will occur for all eternity somewhere across every moment of eternal time, somewhere out there in infinite space. Proposition 179. With a finite number of habitable big wet rocks to pick from, and a finite number of different combinations of living creatures at any moment in time, occurring across an infinite number of different iterations at this and every moment, our finite number of doppelgangers live out a finite number of different sequences. Again, a huge number, yet still a finite number of different iterations, even taken into account all the different choices made by every ancestor that brought you to this very moment. Proposition 180. We are so distant from the next universe, like ours, that has a planet of any name, where your DNA is hearing or seeing these words, that there will never be and has never been any form of shared memories or dreams. All representations of interactions between other pockets of space-time like ours in media and TV and online is all pure fiction. Proposition 181. The multiverse shown in media is all fiction because no thoughts or people or dreams or objects has ever or will ever move between parallel universes or alternate realities. Although it is technically a non-zero chance that two exact copies or pockets of spacetime could evolve side by side, the chances are close enough to zero that it may not yet have ever happened. And even then, they're going to be too distant from each other for any interactions. Proposition 182. With the potential for quadrillions of habitable planets existing inside our local largest co-moving frame of reference, each of us could have thousands of copies of our DNA, or very close matches, alive at some time during our universe's history. But the odds of any of them having the same sounding name are rare, and a name spelled from the same alphabet, even rarer. Proposition 183. Doppelgangers of each of us abound across infinite space, but very few of them share our same names, languages, siblings, or countries. There can be many different alternate realities, but an infinitesimally tiny percentage of parallel universes. Create a fake gun with the thumb and index finger on the hand of your choice and spin it around randomly until you choose to stop pointing in some direction. If you could follow that line for eternity, not only would it intersect your own DNA, it would do so an infinite number of times. Proposition 184. With potentially hundreds of billions of planets with life just in our own galaxy, and quadrillions of planets with life inside our visible universe, some small percentage of us may have our closest doppelgangers inside our own galaxy, while most of us likely have at least one doppelganger inside our visible universe alive right now. If we take a little leeway in allowing 98 to 99% DNA matches to count, then we may all have hundreds of doppelgangers inside our visible universe alive right now. Proposition 185, there is no block universe. Even if every segment and slice of time has already happened elsewhere and will happen again somewhere else, the block universe idea proposes that all events are happening at the same time. And although that becomes true when we include infinite space-time, the block universe is meant to imply our future is already decided because our future already happened. It has not. Many different possible futures lie in front of us. Proposition 186. The past is a collection of decisions already made. The future is a collection of decisions yet to be made. Proposition 187. We have the power to craft and mold our future. We can choose apathy, which leads to manipulation and enslavement, or we can choose to be an active part of fixing things for future generations. To see how much we have accomplished as a species and realize how close we are to throwing it all away is worrisome. We must choose peace and equality in all global decisions. We can no longer permit global decisions that are not in the best interest of the globe. Proposition 188. The correct way to interpret Everett's many worlds theory is to grasp that universes cannot auto-spawn without a sequence of physical causality just because a quantum branch took place. It is true that every different quantum outcome may play out, but each branch does not spawn a new universe. That universe shared a sequence of quantum states of relative time point zero up to the point of the branch, and then all the different branch outcomes played out as many worlds many times. Proposition 189. While two worlds share the same relative timeline from T0 to current, they are considered parallel worlds. Parallel worlds are far more common than parallel universes, where many other big wet rocks would also have to see their same sequence of quantum states repeat exactly. Proposition 190. Two parallel worlds or two parallel universes hit a branch if any quantum outcome differs, or a different decision is chosen. That is what creates an alternate reality. Most alternate realities have multitudes of different quantum branches and are far more common than parallel realities. Most alternate realities start from parallel realities, while an entire other class of realities, neither parallel nor alternate, exists. Proposition 191. Some of those realities see a subquantum mass energy density distribution across relative spacetime too low for a fine structure constant to allow atoms to build. Others, where the density is too high and spacetime is too energetic, likewise don't see the same type of stable baryonic matter that we do. Proposition 192. Other realities where big wet rocks can form around fusion reactors and life can grab a foothold share nothing at all with our patch of spacetime, except many animals could have the same DNA on different worlds, while more advanced species might only see a tiny handful of matching doppelgangers, if any. Those pockets of space-time would have their own alternate realities and parallel worlds, but their dissimilarity to our pocket of space-time put them at the very cusp of what might be considered an alternate reality. Proposition 193. To see two entire pockets of space-time like ours evolve where every single quantum state went through the same changes to get an entire universe that ran in parallel for 14 billion years, you would need to skip over Googles of other universes that would share random worlds that evolve very closely in similar galaxies, but any two exact parallel universes needed to see Everett's branching will almost always occur at great distances from each other. Statistic dictates that likelihood if space is infinite and time is eternal. Proposition 194. To think the entire universe could be finite, or that a real first moment in time could have occurred, or even sillier, that our relative Big Bang created the entirety of all there is, all lead to partial explanations for existence that are wrought with paradoxes. Eternal time and infinite space offers the only true, paradox-free explanation for existence. Proposition 195. If space is not infinite, then there can never be a multiverse. However, if space is infinite, then it becomes statistically impossible for a multiverse not to exist. Ergo, since each of our DNA has always been alive somewhere and will always be alive somewhere, then we are each, in one sense, eternal. Proposition 196. If we took an electron neutrino and could zoom in so it was as large as Laniakea, why should we predict the mass and energy would be uniformly distributed or singularly condensed when co-moving frames of reference is what we already see everywhere else? Proposition 197. We live in an eternally infinite universe made from an infinite number of separate nested pockets of relative pressurized space-time mass energy heat radiation that continue inwards and outwards for an infinite number of different scale factors. Proposition 198. When we accept a universe made from an infinite number of separate nested pockets of space-time, then as we zoom out, we would predict that at some larger scale factor, we would eventually have to see the same average relative density of mass and relative density of energy across the same relative density of time and density of space to repeat in such a way as to see the physics dictated by a fine structure constant reproducing a periodic table of elements at a far, far larger scale factor. Proposition 199, a larger scale periodic table reproducing is a prediction of a truly infinite spacetime. When eventually the same density distribution of mass and energy across relative space and time occurs, we expect to see the physics we are familiar with reproduce naturally. Others call it infinite regression, where there is in fact no smallest measurement of time, space, mass, or energy. Many mistakenly feel this creates a paradox, but closer inspection points to this being the only true 100% paradox-free explanation for the nature of eternal time and infinite space. Proposition 200. The slower you move through space, the faster you move through time. So subquantum periodic tables that could occur hundreds of thousands or millions of nested co-moving frames of reference below Planck scales would see differentials of potentially tens of thousands of years for each of our seconds. 100 billion years could pass in the span of one day on our planet. Proposition 201. Some people toss around the idea that our entire universe is inside an atom in a bigger universe, but don't grasp that only works if there is an infinite regression of smaller and larger scale factors. We can't just have our universe and the one we're inside of without an endless chain. Proposition 202. If a species was provided with an eternal source of nutrition and nourishment and medicine, and could escape each star system long before the host stars go nova, it is not impossible to imagine that an evolutionary process could continue indefinitely. Something eternal cannot have a beginning, and that is a clue that the evolutionary process likely did not either. Proposition 203. There is no indication that evolution could not be an eternal and infinite process if life is afforded the luxury of continued sustenance, nourishment, energy, and even medicines. Something that is eternal by definition, therefore, cannot have a starting point. Proposition 204. If there were an infinite number of scale factors, then occasionally some civilizations would flourish for tredecillions and centillions of years to the point where they have colonized superclusters and allowed their evolutionary chains to evolve into unfathomable number of different iterations. Peaceful civilizations that spread the word of equality and partnership could in theory someday possibly evolve past their corporeal form. Proposition 205. When we already see the fortitude of tardigrades and the resilience of chemoautotrophic bacteria and the marvels of photosynthesis, it is beyond naive to expect anything other than multicellular life forms evolving across the majority of wet rocks that have the basic elements needed to support life, some type of heat source, and either steam or water present. Proposition 206. Eternal evolution means that first life on dead wet rocks evolves through the atomic layer at the time the right byproducts are present to support it. Life evolves everywhere it can spawn and takes hold everywhere it can flourish. Either physical evolution is occurring through the atomic layer, which is possible, or some type of aggregation of whatever consciousness is evolves into our atomic layer. Proposition 207. Not sure I agree with using alternate dimension to describe the realms of periodic tables that exist at other scale factors. They reside in the same 4 dimensions we do, but just not relative to us. I see them as our next largest significant atomic layer and our next smallest significant atomic layer. Proposition 208. If the infinite space at our scale factor was not enough of a multiverse for you, when we consider other scale factors, the true nature of the real multiverse begins to emerge. Every second, universes being created inside every atom, where occasionally the same starting parameters that we saw repeat again. Proposition 209. Of the possible options as to what might happen after death, the concept of eternal pain or eternal pleasure based on decisions made during a tiny, finite sliver of existence defies all logic. Instead, what little evidence we have seems to point to an evolving soul. Everything that ever was or ever will be was the direct result of multiple forms of evolution. So, if there is a soul, then it likely evolves. Proposition 210. The little evidence we have indicates some children have innate memories and can speak foreign languages or play musical instruments or excel in mathematics or chess without ever being taught. Thousands of other documented cases of past memories and details of prior lives have been logged by reliable research teams. We also see animals throughout the world born with knowledge of how to perform tasks without being taught. All this points to the probability of an evolving soul. Proposition 211. Our best understanding of the standard model of particle physics tells us that tiny vibrations of energy creates everything that we can see and hear and touch. Yet it is also vibrations of energy that provides us the light that lets us see, the sounds that let us hear, and even the resistance that lets us touch. Proposition 212. If energy cannot be created or destroyed, then the fact we can see immense amounts of energy in all directions we peer into, including deep within the atom, means that energy must have existed forever and is only now relative to us at these relative points in time and space. Proposition 213. The probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics shows us a universe that creates itself moment by moment. And being both infinite and eternal means there was no moment of creation. A universe that creates itself moment by moment needs no moment of creation. Proposition 214. The simple problem with an eternal and omnipotent creator and its finite creation means that some being spent an infinite eternity first before creating all there is, sitting alone in empty darkness void of anything, fully capable at any moment to bring forth everything, but choosing to wait an infinite span of time before doing so. One of many problems and paradoxes associated with a moment of creation. Proposition 215. If you see the paradoxes invoked by having an eternal creator and finite creation, apply your concept of infinitely eternal energy to be both the creation and the creator, and see they are one and the same. An eternal universe that creates itself moment by moment needs no moment of creation. Proposition 216. Infinite and eternal 4D Minkowski spacetime with an infinite amount of mass and infinite amount of energy at an infinite number of scale factors is unfathomable. Yet it remains the only true paradox-free explanation for existence, and once accepted, it shows us very elegantly how almost all the current mysteries of science begin to literally unravel at our feet. Unlike current theories, it offers multiple avenues towards falsifiability or validation. Proposition 217. If there was no hot dense center that spawned our spacetime, but instead a succession of superluminal collisions, then there is no big crunch, eternal inflation, or conformal cyclic cosmology. Just a different version of a steady-state universe made of an infinite number of separate, nested, co-moving frames of reference, occasionally crossing paths. Proposition 218. Life may form everywhere it grabs a foothold, but it requires a specific sequence of similar circumstances to flourish. It may require a certain number of minimum elements available before life can flourish, and a handful of other factors need to be just right for trees and tree dwellers to flourish, which inevitably leads to tool use and a Stone Age, then to advanced language, and eventually increased intelligence. Proposition 219. Any species that goes through its version of a Stone Age will come out at the end with a far richer vocabulary than when the species began its Stone Age. Any species on any planet that starts to craft tools and use tools will see their language grow exponentially more complex. Over time, that leads to greater intelligence, more complex tools, and the foundations for knowledge. Proposition 220. Other species can develop more complex language and increased intelligence over time. But without dexterity and an ability to flourish, many will stagnate after a certain level of language complexity is reached. Proposition 221. Trees may have aided less than we originally thought in providing oxygen for life on our planet, but their real strength came from the way any planet with trees will find adaptations to certain tree dwellers to develop opposable thumbs, which aids in climbing, hanging, and grabbing. The evolution of opposable thumbs leads the majority of inhabited planets with trees to find primates or primate-like species evolving into the apex predators. Proposition 222. Some percentage of galaxy colonizing species were likely human-like at one point. That number may in fact be larger than the percentage of any non-human-like species also able to achieve that miracle milestone. Proposition 223. Human-like evolution, even across the multiple varieties of possible life out there, could in fact be far more common than other species able to achieve spaceflight. Tree dwellers with opposable thumbs may be the common path to advanced tool creation and usage, and thus advanced language models. Certain of them might look very close to humans, while many other primates could see a wealth of different adaptations based on mutations or environment. Proposition 224. Snouts, fins, teeth, beaks, talons, suction cups, wings, claws, and even paws can use simple tools and see their hosts evolve over time with increased intelligence. But to truly master the elements, it might almost always end up being the opposable fingers of primate-like species that most often succeed. Proposition 225. I predict that in less than 1 century from now, we will have found our 7th rock other than Earth inside our own solar system that shows signs of current life or prior life. Life grabs a foothold everywhere it can, but only the right amount of coincidences offers it the opportunity to flourish. Proposition 226. Planets in habitable zones can be made from a wide range of different combinations of different elements. Not every planet in a habitable zone may contain the right minimum number of elements for life to flourish. Star systems are created through expulsions of elements from supernova explosions, mixing with primordial gas clouds, mixing sometimes with nebulous gas from prior stars, and sometimes even the remnants of neutron star collisions. Proposition 227. A wide range of different combinations of elements produce a wide range of different types of big, wet rocks that life evolve on. A small number of them include the elements from neutron star collisions and ultra-high energy cosmic rays. That means more planets in habitable zones do not have as many radioactive elements as us than those that do. Proposition 228. Radioactive elements are known to cause mutations, and evolution is a random game of chance played against the backdrop of random mutations. So a planet with an elevated number of mutations would be predicted to see jumps in evolution probably occur at multiple points in time. So those few planets in habitable zones with radioactive elements could see evolution proceed much quicker than most others nearby. Proposition 229. Factor in the lower number of planets with similar amounts of radioactive elements into the Drake equation to better see why there may be very few species already venturing out into space. There is also little reason to suspect most civilizations approaching interstellar space travel were not also barreling down a self-destructive path back into feudal dark ages. If half are as dumb as we are, they likely also self-destructed before reaching their full potentials. Proposition 230. Starting with far fewer planets where life may flourish at the pace we saw than the current Drake equation predicts, it is then exasperated by the failure of most species able to reach the stars to overcome their false differences and unite as a species for the benefit of their homeworld's futures. Proposition 231. Our species is no more special than any of the other trillions of other biped primates that learned how to harness energy. Instead of feeling any superiority against any other collection of atoms, we should first humbly accept what we truly are. We are nothing more than time-traveling mutant spawns of stellar puke. Proposition 232. What would a comprehensive theory of everything be if we didn't at least attempt to tackle what happens after we die? Incomplete, I suppose. While it is true that we may never find out for certain what happens until it happens, one thing that is most likely true is that reports from those who passed and were brought back likely only recall what their imagination played out in their mind as their brain cells began being deprived of oxygen. Proposition 233. Another thing that is most likely true is that we invented heaven and hell at first to help control the fear of the unknown, but eventually to aid in establishing reasons for people to be morally ethical. Two basic questions were behind the origins of most religions. Where do we come from and where do we go? What is wholly illogical would be spending an eternity of pleasure or eternity of pain based off decisions made during a tiny, finite sliver of existence. Proposition 234. Reincarnation is the possible option as to what happens after death that has the most credible evidence of the options out there. If it were true, then there would be a heaven and there would be a hell, but the actions of the individual would not dictate where they end up. Instead, it would be the collective actions of the whole that determines long-term if they all find extended periods of heaven-like existence or end up seeing suffering and pain for the majority of species on their planet. Proposition 235. When the actions of the many follow the imaginary instructions of how to find heaven, peace, and love, then those planets could someday see a utopian existence. When the actions of the many follow the imaginary instructions of how to find hell, hatred, bigotry, and war, then those planets likely never get to actualize their potentials and end up with long-term suffering. Proposition 236. Our choices and those of our immediate descendants could be far more important than almost any other generation that came before us or will ever come after us. We may get to choose if, as a whole, our entire species gets to ascend the stairway to heaven, or we remain apathetic and all get to ride a downward spiral along the highway to hell. Proposition 237. One thing that most religions that believe in reincarnation likely got wrong is the idea of karma, or trying to complete some journey. No judge decides the worth of your life or merits of your actions. Remove the idea of anyone or anything reviewing your life at its conclusion and using that knowledge to decide how your next life will start. Every birth is a roll of the dice and luck of the draw, and sometimes good people get unlucky and bad people get lucky. Proposition 238. If there is such a thing as a soul, then it almost certainly evolves, and may have done so for all eternity. As paradoxical as it sounds, an infinitely evolving soul is cohesive with my best understanding of the universe around us. At the very onset of life, first grabbing a foothold on this planet, the separate souls evolving through the atomic layer may have seen in an eternity of prior subatomic jumps into the next largest universe. Proposition 239. Imagine some souls get to be male for 10 or 20 lifetimes in a row, while others could be female for 10 or 20 lifetimes in a row. Now, imagine what that first life as the opposite gender, after so many successive lives as the other, would feel like. It would feel like you were born with the wrong set of pipes. When there is no medical or chemical reason why certain people feel so out of touch with their gender, maybe it's just been so long that certain memories have become reinforced. Proposition 240. So how do we each improve our chances of having the best possible life in our next lifetimes? What is the most selfish thing we could be doing to help promote our best possible lives in the future? Very simply, we should be going out of our way every day to do as much as possible to make the world a better place for everyone else's grandchildren. When every person lives with that core goal, we're going to end up riding a highway to heaven and torching the stairway to hell. Proposition 241. This is being wrapped up at a time where there are conflicting stories about drones, orbs, plasmoids, UAPs, and UFOs. The number of people providing first-hand video evidence is increasing almost exponentially on some platforms. That number and frequency is either growing because of AI video generators or other ways people can doctor videos better now than ever before in our history, or there really is something going on that our governments are not yet ready to disclose. Proposition 242. I cannot speak towards the validity of reports globally of moving plasma orbs and which, if any, have been doctored in some way. But the drones we see around the east coast of the U.S. must be U.S. government sanctioned, or there is zero chance this would have continued for so long. With 2 recent confirmed cases of ball lightning / plasma orbs, any increase in plasmoids could be due to the higher than average solar activity or ongoing shifts in our magnetic fields, but my money is on the recent increase in seismic activity along the east coast. Potentially some combination of all 3 may be at play. Videos that show them moving quickly or intentionally are likely doctored. Proposition 243. Seismic activity, increased solar activity, and changes in our magnetic fields can cause an increase in occurrences of a natural phenomenon called ball lightning, plasmoids, or plasma orbs. They are not sentient, alien, nor connected to the search being conducted by drones across multiple U.S. states and potentially other countries as well. If the widespread, short-lived reports on TikTok about the orbs were legit, then we would see things posted on Reddit, YouTube, Google, the news, etc. There is not. We have a sighting of one plasma orb in New Jersey and possibly a few here or there. But the majority, if not all videos on TikTok showing orbs performing UFO-type activity are fake or AI generated. Proposition 244. There are about 1 quadrillion atoms at the contact points of our ossicles inside our ears, each one potentially holding quadrillions or quintillions of separate subatomic scale factors. If one species out of every trillion universes is able to succeed in uniting their pockets of spacetime to allow for nearly unlimited growth and advancement, we could still have billions of universes at the contact points of the 2 smallest bones in the human body by species at the highest levels of the Kardashev scale. Proposition 245. Those societies that reach the outer edges of their pockets would likely set up vast arrays to try to peer deeper into the emptiness around them, and others might try sending communications to their neighboring systems. Some of those could include arrays of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of communication devices, and the potential is non-zero for some forms of electromagnetic radiation at sub-Planck scales to aggregate in phase into the next largest atomic layer and become barely audible. Proposition 246. If there were species evolving from subatomic scales and entire universes buried inside each atom, then it would be predicted that each of us should hear a non-stop barrage of high-pitched tones and sounds 24 hours a day, with totally different frequencies and pitches being heard in both ears. Proposition 247. It would also be predicted that occasionally some species would build a far larger array than anything close and could keep it running for millions of their years, where subatomic evolution would predict that almost all of us should hear in one ear or the other, at least once every 2 or 3 days, a much louder and more distinguished high-pitched tone that goes on for 20 seconds or longer. Proposition 248. Some of us become hyper-focused on the endless barrage of noise that we all receive and have trouble ignoring the sounds and suffer greater cases of tinnitus than everyone else who is able to shift their mind's focus away from the sounds and onto other things. When you force your mind not to concentrate on the sounds, for the most part, you can get your tinnitus to subside. Proposition 249. If you have never heard the symphonies of silence, then your ossicles may not be working properly, or you never really focused hard in a very quiet setting at what your ears are actually saying to you. Just 3 or 4 minutes of focusing on the silence inside your ears will usually unlock the endless noise that has been there the whole time. For those who will end up with tinnitus because of me, I sincerely apologize for any grief it causes you.
Proposition 250. For over 40 years, I have put this collection of different propositions together, and while some of the concepts have evolved and matured over time, I have yet to find any concrete empirical evidence that even a single one of them is wrong. Instead, if taken as a whole, the simple and elegant story they tell unlocks nearly all of our current mysteries and may be one of the best examples of Occam's razor ever created by a time-traveling biped mutant spawn of stellar puke. Proposition 251. Singularities exist only on paper and in formula, but not in the physical realm. You can never place within any bounded area of space or time an infinite amount of relative mass or infinite amount of relative energy or infinite amount of relative time or infinite amount of relative space. Singularities do not exist in nature and crop up in spots where we do not yet have our physics correct. Proposition 252. There was no singularity at the start of our Big Bang.
There are no singularities at the center of the event horizon around each black hole. Time does not stop if moving at the speed of light. Moving faster than the speed of light does not cause you to move backwards in time. When things approach infinity, besides the totality of space or time, then we have likely made an incorrect conclusion along the way because the physical realm is always relative. Proposition 253. At the center of every black hole is a large polyquark or dense quark soup. Quark degeneracy pressure relies on immense gravitational pressures to turn neutrons into quarks, where the strong nuclear force, which is 100 trillion times as strong as gravity, takes over. The dense central polyquark grows as it absorbs mass, and in turn, the surface area of the event horizon would grow proportionally. Proposition 254. Hawking radiation does exist, and one of a pair of particles created could escape the event horizon of a black hole. However, this does not lead to a black hole's evaporation over time. While it is true that there is a thin sphere just inside the inner edge of the event horizon, where one of a pair does escape, however, there is a sphere of marginally larger surface area where the pair production occurs outside the black hole and one of a pair is sent into the event horizon. Black holes do not evaporate, and the root cause of Hawking radiation actually increases the black hole's mass over time. Proposition 255. There are solutions to the field equations of general relativity that likely do not exist in the physical realm. Singularities, white holes, and wormholes could all be mathematical constructs that may appear elegant on paper, yet lack any true physical existence anywhere across space and time. Proposition 256. White holes, if they ever actually do manifest in our physical realm, are likely tiny and transient. They cannot be self-sustaining, and their dissipation likely occurs at an exponential rate based off mass. Far more likely, they have never and will never leave the pages of formulas and equations. Proposition 257. Wormholes, if they ever actually do manifest in our physical realm, are likely tiny and transient. They are non-traversable, likely collapse easily, and they could never offer an ability to traverse light years of space in fractions of the time. At best, before a wormhole collapses, not that it would be big enough to send more than a molecule through, we might see light-second traversal of space, but never light years. That is, if they even manifest at all, which is highly speculative. Proposition 258. The arrow of time flows in one direction only. No matter how fast you travel, you will never traverse the line of time in reverse. No matter where you end up, you will always be at some future moment in time from the point you left, no matter your speed. However, time machines are actually very common, and almost every one of us has ridden in or on one before. Any mechanical device that you enter or step onto and then exit at some future point in time could be considered a time machine that transported you into the future. None will ever bring anyone or anything into the past. Ever. Proposition 259. The subquantum realm has an average energy density and mass density, and what we see inside our visible patch of space-time might be far denser than what we find in the areas between similar pockets of space-time. In the area between our universe and the siblings it is playing follow the leaders in our next largest co-moving frame of reference, the energy density of the subquantum realm would be predicted to be lower. We would also predict the distribution of neutrinos would decrease in those areas farthest from any other pockets of space-time. Proposition 260. Mass and motion moves in waves, and subquantum mass and motion moving relatively faster than our cosmic speed limit creates subquantum waves of energy. All waves of energy have a general trajectory but try to spread out in all three spatial dimensions.
Sometimes waves of energy can deflect, reflect, diffract, refract, polarize, and synchronize in phase. Proposition 261. In order for waves to be in phase, one or more polarizations that are present in parallel moving waves must be synchronized to see waves of energy increase in amplitude. The mass energy density of the subquantum realm within an area would define the types of polarizations seen as well. When there is sufficient subquantum energy density for a fine structure constant to produce quanta that we can measure, we get particles of the standard model. Proposition 262. Areas where the subquantum energy density is too low, no fine structure constant would be present to see atoms and electrons form. Areas where the subquantum energy density is too high will likely be located inside the event horizons of supermassive black holes. In between, we see aggregations of subquantum energy manifest as our standard model of particles and the quantum fields that describe how they interact. Proposition 263. Quantum fields do not magically exist without having an underlying cause. That cause is a realm far smaller than the electron neutrino in quantities likely far higher than all neutrinos. For each of the trillions of neutrinos that pass through us every few seconds, hundreds or thousands times more subquantum waves of energy also pass through us. Proposition 264. Separate quantum fields may make the math of physics easier to visualize, but there is a single field of energy, the fifth dimension. That dictates how and where aggregations of subquantum waves of energy in phase coalesce as a measurable unit of quantized energy at our scale factor to create stable particles. Proposition 265. Energy moves in spherical waves, so polarizations can happen in more than two spatial dimensions. How those subtle differences occur within synchronized polarizations needed for waves to be in phase may play a part in whether we get a stable particle or a virtual particle. Proposition 266. Alongside the differences in how three-dimensional polarizations and synchronization can aggregate in phase, combined with the different density distributions of the subquantum waves of energy, will someday point to frequency and vibration being the resonant resonance of existence. Tesla saw this over a century ago. Proposition 267. String theory can offer some beautiful math to help express tiny vibrations of energy, not point strings, as the framers of our standard model of particle physics put its attempt to loop in gravity and add hidden dimensions that only exist in formula and pass it off as reality is when string theory jumped the shark. A rare instance where a failure at one goal, explaining the strong nuclear force, morphed into something completely different yet still valuable. Pretty math. But the concept of point strings are frayed at both ends, and there is nothing super about their symmetry. Proposition 268. There are no point strings, just as there are no point particles. It was solely a convenience to assume there is an elementary structure to our universe instead of embracing what relativity has been screaming to us for over a century. We can see and measure what is relative to us, so there are predicted limits to how small or how far away we will ever be able to see. Proposition 269. A common limitation of the human mind is having a hard time grasping that nothing comes from nothing and everything comes from something. Sounds overly simplistic until you try to grasp there can be no true smallest units of time, space, energy, mass, gravitational attraction, magnetic attraction, and thus also heat and luminosity. Beyond the realms that are relative to us exist scale factors far larger and far smaller than the mind is willing to wrap itself around. Proposition 270. It is not the fact that there is evidence for subquantum mass that points towards infinite regression. It's a concept that we understand already in multiverse dynamics about non-zero statistics across infinite iterations of nested successive pockets of relative spacetime. There is a non-zero chance for the same density of mass and density of energy across the same density of space and density of time to again manifest the natural properties needed to see a fine structure constant at some higher scale factor, so it must happen eventually. Proposition 271. If it becomes statistically impossible for there not to be a larger universe and a larger periodic table beyond us, then it immediately becomes statistically impossible for there not to be an infinite regression of smaller and larger periodic tables and an infinite number of scale factors. I truly cannot stress enough how firmly I believe that the only true paradox-free explanation for existence and reality is an eternally infinite and infinitely eternal universe with no smallest or largest scale factors. Mind-boggling? Yes. Paradox-free? Yes. Really? Yes. Proposition 272. If the true structure of the universe was an infinite number of separate nested pockets of relative pressurized space-time, mass energy, heat radiation, nested co-moving frames of reference, that would predict there must be other instances of the same relative energy density and relative mass density across relative space-time occurring at an infinite number of different scale factors. Take the idea of eternal monkeys playing with keyboards, crafting Shakespeare, and apply the concept to how larger and larger co-moving frames of reference will always appear differently based on which hierarchical parent frame of reference they are observed from. Zoom out far enough, and a fine structure constant is predicted to repeat. Proposition 273. Just as Neo can break out of the matrix to see the underlying reality, those who embrace infinite regression and grasp how it is truly the only paradox-free explanation for existence can finally marvel at the true wonder of the universe around us without filters or shades. When someone accepts eternal time and infinite space as undeniable, self-evident truths, then instead of feeling helpless, hopeless, insignificant, and lost, you should feel empowered by the knowledge that no prayer or divine intervention is going to alter our future. Only our decisions and actions can do that. Proposition 274. Statistical probabilities point towards infinite regression, nested successions of co-moving frames of reference, intersecting pockets of superluminal space-time, eternal time, infinite space, eternal evolution, and an infinite number of iterations of a finite number of different species living on a finite number of different big wet rocks as the true natural state of nature. Proposition 275. The ability to provide the sole paradox-free explanation for reality while seeing the implications of that premise solving so many of the current most pressing mysteries of science alongside the simple elegance of its explanation, would again have William of Ockham smiling on the concepts of infinite regression, successive collision theory, nested pockets of spacetime, the subquantum realm, the sub-subquantum realm, eternal evolution, and the dissipating tensor mesh strength of gravitational attraction across a nested succession of parent co-moving frames of reference. Proposition 276. There is no smallest measurement of time. There is no smallest measurement of space. There is no smallest measurement of energy. There is no smallest measurement of mass. There is no smallest measurement of heat. There is no smallest measurement of luminosity. We have smallest relative measurements dictated by the laws of physics. Proposition 277. There is no largest measurement of time. There is no largest measurement of space. There is no largest measurement of energy. There is no largest measurement of mass. There is no largest measurement of heat. There is no largest measurement of luminosity. We have largest relative measurements dictated by the laws of physics. Proposition 278. Our largest measurable pocket of spacetime is likely in some type of orbit or part of something larger that is in orbit. Our largest measurable co-moving frame of reference may be orbited by one or more satellite sibling universes.
Our largest measurable visible horizon and the co-moving portions created during the same sequence of events that are beyond the parts we can see may be on a collision course someday with some other pocket of spacetime. Proposition 279. The intersecting pockets that forged our visible universe unlikely saw a tiny overlap in their paths where there were just enough initial collisions to create the universe we see. It is far more likely there was a larger portion of overlap where the pockets intersected and many other pockets of space-time besides ours were forged. Over time, as the gravitational instructions between them all get to talk, new successions of nested pockets of space-time will form. But the entire leftover spawn itself would still be hurling through space and likely orbiting something else. Proposition 280. The two pockets that collided probably saw 90 to 95% of their objects completely miss each other as the pockets slid through shared space-time together while they nonchalantly continued along their merry way. The relative starting velocity of the two colliding pockets and the leftover momentum of the pockets that were created would determine if the source pockets move away too quickly or whether the succession of nested pockets created ends up trailing or orbiting one of the original source pockets. Proposition 281. Our visible universe is in orbit inside a co-moving frame of reference, in orbit inside a co-moving frame of reference, in orbit inside a larger and larger succession of co-moving frames of reference. I predict it is unknowable for any species to ever be able to gauge how many of their parent pockets of space were also created during the same set of collisions that spawned themselves. Our grandparent and great-grandparent frames of reference may have been created with us. So besides our siblings sharing the same co-moving frames of reference as our visible universe, we also likely have many cousins also spawned from the same succession of superluminal collisions that created our visible section of it. Proposition 282. There was no first second, nor will there be a last year. There is no first light second, nor will there be a last light year. There was no first force or first energy, nor will there be last energy. There was no first matter or object, nor will there be a last particle. There was no first collision, nor will there be a last collision. Proposition 283. Hopefully long after the big freeze, and then maybe even a big rip, our pocket of space-time will eventually see another collision, where not only would the collisions of celestial bodies and even nebulous gas turn mass into hot, dense energy, but potentially even the subquantum foam and neutrinos, when passing near other subquantum foam or neutrinos at relative speeds in excess of 2 or 4 or 42 times the speed of light, could also vaporize into hot, dense swirling energy that someday form atoms and galaxies again. Proposition 284. If the nested succession of parent frames of reference involved in the two pockets that intersected to create our visible patch of spacetime were tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of nested levels higher than our visible universe, then the relative speeds of the collisions that occurred could easily have surpassed 8 or 16 times the speed of light. Collisions occurring with kinetic energies surpassing 48 or 42 times the speed of light involves physics we can't even fathom. But we can make predictions, and our best idea of what Laniakea looks like looks far more like the results of collisions than it does expansion from a hot, dense center. Proposition 285. When two areas of spacetime pass through each other at those types of speeds, the physics of collisions and the mass and heat and energy created can be modeled with supercomputers someday. But we cannot neglect the impacts of spacetime itself. Vacuum energy, virtual particles, subquantum foam, neutrinos, stray electrons and photons in sparse nebulous gas would all experience incredible heat and friction and would also turn into hot plasma, leaving hot, swirling, dense plasma behind as the larger pockets continued on their ways. Proposition 286. Our current lambda CDM model is very detailed and complex, starting with physics occurring fractions of a second after the start of something. I see a big problem in the physics behind what caused that something to release so much heat and energy from such a tiny, dense spot. It made sense when proposed, but after so many band-aids have been added over the years that it can no longer adequately answer too many mysteries to ignore, the time has finally come to admit that an assumption made over a century ago may have been wrong. Proposition 287. We must shed our last shreds of Earth-centricity and embrace the reality that time is eternal, space is infinite, and an infinite span of time, thus infinite number of separate habitable planets, pre-existed the direct chain of events that spawned our visible universe. An infinite number of life forms are alive right now across an infinite span of space. An infinite number of living creatures will be born and die long after our entire visible universe has dissipated or been absorbed elsewhere. Proposition 288. Everything that exists now, has ever existed, or will ever exist is the direct and indirect result of multiple evolutions and revolutions that have continued eternally. Revolutions create evolutions, and everything evolves and re-evolves, revolves and re-revolves. The two processes of evolution and revolution are inextricably intertwined for all eternity. Proposition 289. Reality minus paradox means an infinite number of eternally evolving and revolving collections of nested pockets of space-time, all hurling through infinite space for all eternity. Everything evolves and everything revolves eternally. Chaos and random interactions following the laws of physics dictates what happens, where it happens, and when it happens. We are the result of random chaos and physics, letting us see a tiny span of space for a tiny span of time. Proposition 290. No first cause is not a paradox, as many like to argue. Instead, any first cause always invokes a paradox. Grasping there could never be a first cause, if time is eternal, helps make it easier to digest the true infinite and eternal structure of a never-ending succession of collisions that have happened for all eternity. Proposition 291. Instead of putting faith in a creator, put your faith in the creation. Only humans and nothing divine is going to control how far in our evolutionary process we get to achieve, this time on this planet. Humans have existed on an infinite number of other planets before us and exist on an infinite number of other planets right now. Let us aim for above average and try not to destroy ourselves when we are finally so close to actualizing a flourishing society for all creatures. Proposition 292. Not seeing intelligent life out there is likely in some part due to most intelligent life not being intelligent enough to make the drastic changes needed to unite a species globally for a common cause. Self-destruction is the path of the meek follow. One planet after another planet, after another planet. When global decisions are continually being made that are not in the best interest of the entire globe, then civilizations are doomed to collapse. We can either learn from our own mistakes and try this civilization thing again in 1,000 years, or learn from the mistakes countless other planets have made and begin to chart a new course for humanity. Proposition 293. Dark ages once again loom ahead of us for our planet if we do not begin to force drastic changes. If only 50% of the money that has been invested in the last 50 years by countries, private industries, and individual citizens for doomsday planning and extended underground living arrangements had instead been spent on fixing the world's problems, I cannot fathom how much less need there would be for those shelters right now. Proposition 294. If we continue overpopulating ourselves out of available resources, raping and pillaging our planet while trashing her natural beauty, adding toxins and plastics to all of her ecosystems, all while allowing private industry to prosper in doing so, then we should not be surprised when civilization begins to teeter on collapse. Wars between countries and wars between classes lie ahead of us, as humans will fight to survive amongst dwindling resources and exorbitant inflation. Proposition 295. Seems unfair that the families of the people who have raped our planet and people for so long and are most responsible for the pending collapse of civilization should be the ones whose descendants get to survive, while the majority of the rest of ours will suffer, struggle, and die. It would be foolish to assume that countries in the top 1% do not see the writing on the wall. They are planning on starvation, disease, pestilence, and class warfare to get us back down under 1 billion people, and they plan for their lineages to be among them. This reality lies ahead of us if we allow our combined global apathy to proceed for too long. We may be the last generation able to force this change before it's too late. Proposition 296. We must prevent the abuse of those in power who will never admit to their plans to sacrifice 7 out of every 8 people so they can try to start again. Certainly, the think tanks of most major countries have done the math and realize what is in store, and rather than all agree to work together, we decide to fight till the end. We do not need to sacrifice 3/4 of our population or more to begin to flourish. There are ample opportunities for global wealth and prosperity once we stop making it profitable to destroy our planet. Proposition 297. There is a phrase that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. We are at a precipice in our evolutionary chain right now, where the next few generations get to decide whether the human chain breaks or gets stronger. Those who seek to only strengthen their links in our chain and are complacent to the preventable weaknesses in all the other links holding everything together are naively willing to sacrifice the chain to keep their one link from breaking. Proposition 298. If we continue along our current path, instead of an enduring chain, we get a bunch of whole links amongst a sea of broken links. The choice is ours to help see as many links as possible seek to redistribute their own strengths across all other links now and for generations to come, so we can all help reinforce the entire chain. The stronger our weakest links become, the stronger our chain becomes. Ubuntu. Proposition 299. Only when the strongest links help reinforce the rest can every link actualize their true potentials and help the entire chain endure for as long as possible. Embracing Ubuntu is how we succeed where so many other planets that have reached this stage before us have self-destructed. We can either let those in power now succeed in restarting civilization in their image, or we can work together, grab the crash cart, yell clear, and jumpstart a world where everyone gets to thrive. Proposition 300. Ubuntu is a philosophy from the same planes where humanity is believed to have sprung into life that claims that we are because I am, and I am because we are. The strength of each tribe comes from growing in numbers where all are strong. Helping the weakest succeed, instead of manipulating them, is how to become the strongest tribe. Making the weakest links stronger instead of taking advantage of their weakness is how a chain can tackle greater burdens with ease where it would have otherwise faltered. Proposition 301. While survival of the fittest may be a good analogy for how certain species or members of the pack might thrive where others falter, it does not make it the optimal way to see the entire pack flourish. If we claim to have the zest for life that our animal instincts dictate we have, then we should be seeking ways to remove the disparity between the haves and the have-nots and begin working to make everyone into haves. The more haves we have, the more consumers we have, and thus the more producers we need. Proposition 302. Maybe inside any company, no employee should make more than 4 times any other. The incentive is there for all employees to see a company thrive, and they all benefit more equitably when the company is doing well. There are many other choices to capitalism, including pure communism, and we should not be so quick to claim any solution is optimal until the best minds on our planet are tasked with crafting better rules. Proposition 303. If we want to flourish for millennia and longer, it will only happen if we work together as a united species to make it happen. We must set aside our differences about color or race or religion or nationality or political affiliation and remove our prejudices and bigotries so we can begin to work together, united in voice, united in purpose, and united in action. Proposition 304. Our socioeconomic systems are in their infancies. Civilizations that survive for tens of thousands of years may offer utopian-like societies and systems of government, and we would be fools to think that anything on this planet right now is the best or most evolved political system available. A proper blend of communism, socialism, and capitalism can exist as long as we remove all chances for those in power to unfairly redistribute the fruits of our shared labors. Proposition 305. We should not let the failures of past and current governments dissuade us from seeking out the right blend of communism, socialism, and capitalism. The three can be integrated into a self-sustaining, just and fair and equitable method of managing resources and infrastructure. When no decisions are made behind closed doors, and every decision is placed before public vote, and term limits prevent ongoing abuse by corruption that always ensues when political dynasties have space to fester, then and only then could we claim to be on the right path. Proposition 306. A new political party can help loosen the stranglehold seen now in many countries with 2 or 3 primary political parties, all wrought with corruption and self-preservation, above actually working to support their constituencies. We can open up the door for a new global political party that can begin to help reshape our planet in the best interest of all. If we end up failing, it may be because we were shut down and stomped out, but it should not be for our lack of trying. Proposition 307. So what do we need to do to heal a broken planet and broken species? Where do we start, and what can we really do to force change? What steps should we be doing to protect ourselves and try to secure the best chance for our species to thrive and flourish? First, we must accept that we are in control and we can craft our own destiny. The choices we make and our offspring make can help shape the course of our future. We must begin to make global decisions that are truly in the best interest of the entire globe. Proposition 308. I feel there are specific changes we should be focusing on over the next decade and the next century if we really wish to see our species prosper and flourish. They include, but are not limited to, 1. A fleet of multifunction AI space drones. 2. 100% recycle, refurbish, repurpose. 3. Daily logistics optimizations using forecasting. 4. Nearly limitless energy. 5. World Arbitration Council. And 6. Worldwide employment. There are other changes as well, but these are some of the ones with the greatest return on investment, where that ROI is the difference between flourishing 100,000 years from now or failing less than 100 years from now. Proposition 309. Establishing the largest possible array of foreign object detectors could be the single most important task we can undertake to help see that our species gets to try to be around 1,000,000 or even billion years from now. We need decades' notice of any object with a remote chance of intersecting our planet's orbit. We need decades' notice of any object with a remote chance of entering our solar system. Proposition 310. Our solar system hangs in a fragile balance. So far, we have been lucky that interstellar visitors have not disrupted this stability, but not only could a random single object possess extinction-level possibilities if it hit our planet, just disrupting multiple other objects inside our solar system without hitting any of them could still end up wiping out our species. Proposition 311. We need a huge array between 100,000 and 1,000,000 plus smart drones, always searching in all directions for any form of motion in much more than just visible light. They would be AI-based and able to multitask with multiple secondary functions, the obvious one being mining. They would be able to match the speed of an object attached to it, crawl around on it, scan it, and mine it.
They would work as teams where each team member could take on any of the other roles that they all share. Proposition 312. What is mined is placed together where cold welding in space should allow most minerals to become a larger single object that can be hurled towards the inner planets, where they can be intercepted by other drones. Drones would have thrusters, and multiple drones together could use this thrust to launch objects towards the inner planets, just as multiple drones near the outer planets could catch incoming battery packs being sent from the inner planets, slow them down, and direct them to the closest recharging stations. Proposition 313. That same concept of working in teams would allow them to react when any motion is seen, where AI algorithms feel an object could threaten the stability of our solar system, or worse, intersect the same relative point in spacetime as the big wet rock we all share. Some would match speed and attach, while others would continually hurl thruster packs and battery packs into the oncoming path of the object, where other drones would be catching them and redirecting them to collection centers on the object, where they can be redistributed as needed. Proposition 314. Small course corrections done from far distances away can have huge impacts on how an object might traverse through our star system and what impact it could have. The goal would usually be to steer the object into a stable orbit around the sun or another planet or moon, and if the AI algorithms don't give it a 90% chance of success, then to steer it back out of our star system, or worst case, crash into a planet or moon. Proposition 315. Given sufficient time, most any celestial visitor except the largest and fastest could be redirected into a predetermined orbit. Trying to break them up by smashing things into them produces too many unknown variables, but there might be times where many repeated smaller collisions near one area could potentially work better than attaching thrusters. Speeding up suicide drones might be a better use of battering thruster packs in some small percentage of cases. Great to have this thing called physics to help us decide. Proposition 316. How much we are limited in our ability to save our species from an extinction-level collision is directly related to the constraints of those exact physics. Certain variables, incoming relative velocity and incoming relative mass, are two variables beyond our control. So we only have one variable left to work with: the amount of time between detection and collision. And the actions we take and how quickly we take them during that period are directly proportional to our success rate. Proposition 317. Let's just hope a black hole never decides to stop by to say hello, because the physics in deviating their paths is far more complicated. Random celestial objects of all sizes and types, including black holes, planets, stars, as well as moons and asteroids, all traverse intergalactic and interstellar space. The chance of an extinction-level event in the next 1,000 years is non-zero, and we should be doing whatever is within our power preparing for such an event, so we have as much forewarning as possible. Proposition 318. The key to helping our species survive and hopefully flourish is not going to come from colonizing Mars too soon. Putting efforts into a fleet of drones built to help safeguard the integrity of our host star system's current orbits far outweighs nearly any other global priority as far as I'm concerned. We are playing dice with the fate of our species, whether Einstein wanted to admit it or not. Random chance could end our species and planet, and minimizing those chances should always remain a top priority. Proposition 319. Once a satisfactory course correction has been accomplished, then mining begins, and the other function of every drone is the search for life or prior life or the ingredients for life. All information is constantly shared, and by the time the information makes it back to headquarters on Earth, the drones may have already solved a potential crisis before humans needed to tell them what to do. That's where the real power of AI is going to come from. Reacting to foreign visitors with a systematic and redundant plan that can be activated without direction by those on Earth. Proposition 320. Drones near the inner planets would also be tracking movement, and along with all their peers, will be constantly logging any new potential objects or changes in the predicted paths of logged bodies. There should reach a time where we have numbered every object inside our heliopause, and AI algorithms decide the order these will be mined or scoured for life based on what they learned from their prior attempts. Scientific missions to attach to, scan, and mine those bodies already inside our star system offers us almost unlimited resources for centuries to come. Proposition 321. The interplanet drones would be catching incoming mined minerals, incoming expired battery packs, possibly expired thruster packs if we can't figure out how to recharge them out past Jupiter, samples from interstellar visitors, any samples of life or sign of prior life, and then redirect them to their appropriate target destinations. Proposition 322. Battery packs would be redirected towards the drones circling the sun where energy capture is taking place in vast quantities. Minerals would be redirected either to the moon or Mars where most all manufacturing would be taking place. Pollution on Mars and the moon can be as horrendous as needed if it keeps it off our planet, and those living there are never exposed to it. Other items are sent to one of the space stations for closer examination and study. They would also be collecting filled battery packs and full thruster packs and sending them out to many different areas in all three spatial dimensions where collection points have been established inside our heliopause. Proposition 323. Capturing energy for use later and not letting that energy dissipate over the years it takes to reach its final collection point or the years it sits idle means that we need to invest significant time and resources trying to figure out what material or composite can make the best springs. Springs that can be stretched by energy from the sun and heated while stretching to increase elasticity can then be held steady by a simple mechanical lock and provide the most effective method of storing energy for long periods of time without energy loss. Proposition 324. Using a mechanical battery filled with potential energy instead of a chemical battery or other type would offer us the best method of powering a fleet of drones far away from the source of energy. It also means that not only solar power could charge these spring arrays, but thermal heat could also be used, and so the outer planets and their moons could offer a chance to recharge batteries also. Someday we might also be able to leverage winds moving on planets or moons or liquids flowing on planets or moons as additional energy sources far from our host star. Proposition 325. One of the last functions I would like to see would leverage Tesla's ideas about wireless energy transmission to capture solar energy near the sun with advanced long-lasting solar panels that not only charge up the spring batteries, but could also shoot blasts of plasma or photons at collection points around our planet. Then, when enough energy is captured, it shoots down to special collection points on each continent. There would be man-made directed lightning sent from the upper atmosphere to specific collection points able to convert solar energy into far more power than we can do with terrestrial capture devices. Proposition 326. Different materials can be impacted by different frequencies of light and non-visible EM radiation. Leveraging multiple materials in separate layers can provide ultra-dense methods of turning solar photons into streams of electrons we can more efficiently manage. Using materials that last the longest, even if not generating the highest energy output, introduce the smallest number of maintenance cycles, and the balance between the two will be key. Proposition 327. Properly leveraging just a tiny amount of the energy coming from our sun more efficiently and effectively can help provide us with nearly unlimited energy to feed an energy-hungry planet of energy-hungry biped mutant spawns of stellar puke. Moving away from fossil fuels is key, but charging electronic vehicles away from the primary domicile needs to become the exception. Proposition 328. The arrays of springs, should science figure out how to make the process efficient, would be stretched well ahead of time so a vehicle or truck or boat or plane or portable home appliance just replaces its battery pack, or 8 out of 10 or 90 out of 100 from its array of battery packs.
The process to recharge should take as much time as filling up the tank, or less. Charging should be done ahead of needing to replace the battery packs, until, if ever, it becomes efficient to stretch the springs quickly at the time of fill-up. Proposition 329. Whatever we end up with, springs or better chemical batteries, they must be interchangeable. They need to be something that can be pre-charged and swapped out easily. The idea of charging stations is a fad that will hopefully be relegated to secondary uses. Vehicles should be able to charge enough overnight for them to complete their daily travels, and only exceptions should be needed for charging externally. Similar arrays of interchangeable batteries could also be seen powering other portable devices around the home. Daily transit could transition to small mobile modular pods that could connect when going longer distances and break off as needed into individual self-driving aerodynamic EV pods. Proposition 330. Every domicile needs its own backup spring pack or large gravity battery, built to last and running along the entire side or sides of the domicile. Not sure of the logistics or the size or type or physics, but energy capture can happen locally using solar on the roof, wind at the top corners of the roof, and water from the drainage off the roof. But also, every method of exercise can turn human energy into stored potential energy inside the best mechanical battery we can design. All forms of exercise can be used to save energy for emergencies and to help balance out demand across a large grid. Hybrid battery arrays that combine springs, gravity, or chemicals can all work together to meet a wide range of purposes. Proposition 331. The fact we don't capture human exercise energy from every jail, correctional facility, and gym is one change we need to implement over the next decade. Nearly every type of exercise equipment could allow a transfer of human kinetic energy into stored potential energy. This is one area where we don't need to convert energy first to create spring tension, since human energy can be used directly to stretch springs, and I envision that one human in 1 hour could likely surpass a standard-sized solar panel operating for a full week. With the right kind of design changes, using locking gears of different ratios, we can directly turn lots of manual machines directly into manual spring tensioners. Proposition 332. The next most important crisis that we must begin to focus on is how to turn refuse and rubbish and rubble and rotten residues into our bricks, blocks, boards, bolts, beams, booms, bridges, backings, blockings, battens, balustrades, balusters, and banisters. Again, AI drones can be leveraged to segment all waste into constituent groups of like items for recycling and repurposing. Over time, the way we package items must change, because the products and packaging must also be made from materials that are easy and simple and clean and efficient to recycle. Plastic is not a great choice for environmentally friendly recycling. Proposition 333. Each continent could have multiple repurposing centers where all new garbage is brought, but so is all the garbage in our oceans and landfills and garbage dumps and junkyards and even tons of space debris, all to be collected from centralized area where fleets of AI drones dissect everything that pass along the process into becoming the building materials we need to build immense new cities that are tens of miles wide and tens of miles long and miles high, and fully efficient and redundant and self-sustaining. We can employ the entire world and then offer them safe housing just by putting our garbage to better use. Proposition 334. We already have a company that is willing to visit your house every day to drop off items you ordered online. Many other companies drop off items to your house at random intervals, sometimes when nobody will be around for hours. Home delivery currently suffers from many inefficiencies that are easy to solve. Forecasting and advanced logistics tied to product longevity can have the items you use most often arrive on schedule and quantities so you never run out and it never goes bad. Proposition 335. When suppliers work together to leverage forecasting and advanced logistics, then just as a household should never run out and rarely go bad, so can distribution centers stay properly stocked dynamically and plan better long-term where products will need to be and when ahead of the times they need to be there. Global supply chain efficiencies need to be harnessed across the globe, and we can flourish with abundance instead of suffering in squalor. Proposition 336. Right now, items ship all over the world and fuel is burned, or expensive batteries that have shorter lifespans than we need will soon be tossed aside as refuse. But by lowering the amount of movement of products near the minimum needed to support the never run out and never go bad model, we can use AI and advanced logistics based on consumption patterns to have a package arrive at everyone's door during the best time windows of their choosing. Proposition 337. No longer do stores need to pay people to stock the shelves so they can pay other people to unstock the shelves and put items into separate containers for pickup or delivery. Soon, they could just put in bids for the items they want to sell in an area they want to sell in, and the centralized distributor can accept lowest bids and outsource the sales while consolidating the shipments, and every company involved could benefit. Proposition 338. Packaging no longer needs to be fancy, and waste can be cut down by using materials that are easy to clean and disinfect to minimize what we need to recycle in the first place. That same container dropped off each day, once emptied, would be filled with that day's refuse and garbage. The same company that drops off items automatically being replenished, plus any one-off items ordered, would take away your trash and bring it to the centralized processing centers. We can remove huge burdens on the requirements needed for recycling through reusing and repurposing. Huge amounts of global waste can be eliminated by standardizing on easy to repurpose and clean to recycle packaging materials. Proposition 339. I offer Mr. Musk a better plan for his space endeavors than rushing to colonize Mars, and Mr. Bezos a method of helping save our planet by reinventing his company yet again. Then I challenge all other multi-billionaires to also invest $1 billion each towards Project Survival, a think tank of the brightest minds focused on solving the most pressing problems ahead of us. Done properly, without graft or corruption, we could in fact change the course and destiny of our planet and see a world where every child would have equal opportunity to flourish and excel. Proposition 340. Science fiction is only fiction until it isn't. Most ideas predate their actualization, and some may have seemed far-fetched when first presented. Plenty of science fiction may forever remain in the realms of the imaginary, such as traversable wormholes, stable white holes, traversing the line of time in reverse, or transporting intelligent organic matter fully intact. Our species, failing to become interstellar travelers, regardless of the hardships involved, is to prematurely admit defeat. Our species has shown time and time again what our ingenuity and initiative can achieve with the right incentive, and I am certain that the survival of our species for as long as we can evolve is almost certainly the primary reason life first takes hold on big wet rocks, regardless of how or why we are here. Plenty of obstacles are ahead of us, but none will be solved until our species stops being the primary one. Proposition 341. Project Survival, a group of the smartest 1% of all bachelor's, master's, and PhD students across the globe, each holding an optional paid 2-year term directly after graduation and before entering the workforce, could morph into what I coined the World Arbitration Council. Made from the brightest minds, each holding 2-year terms and breaking into groups to tackle all the issues presented to them, helping countries negotiate compromises and determining where people or resources need to move away from or flock to for optimal logistics, among many other independent recommendations they would be making regularly. Proposition 342. A World Arbitration Council could take each issue and provide unbiased and rational options. The people impacted by that decision would be the ones who would need to vote. The Council offers ideas and tries to cover a wide array of the best ideas, but the people still need to choose. When that choice is divided, then people can either live under a rule they did not want, or move to an area that follows their preferences. Open borders and global equality lets people of similar preferences share locales, offering as many people as possible the best quality of life possible. Proposition 343. Without a global peacekeeping body where ideas generate, nurture, and foster across some of our planet's smartest individuals, we are stuck with iron-fisted rulers, self-serving puppets, and desperate allocations of global resources. Instead, if we ever want to see 100 billion humans flourishing across our star system, we must begin to set aside our petty differences and learn to cooperate and compromise as a single species sharing a big wet rock that we are borrowing from our grandchildren. Proposition 344. Few bigots, racists, or others spewing hate grasp how long our species looked significantly similar to each other before subtle differences evolved recently. It has only been during the most recent 0.01% of humanoid evolution where things like skin color, eye shape, and other features evolved differently enough from each other to see different races of the same species. We are all time-traveling biped mutant spawns of stellar puke with nearly the same DNA, and not one of us has the right to claim superiority or preferential treatment over any other. Proposition 345. When every person on this planet has access to the internet and a cell phone, something that could be less than a decade away, then we no longer need to worry about term limits because we no longer need politicians. An unbiased council offering solutions only needs people to vote. It does not need people who have stopped acting in the best interest of their constituents and instead regularly misdirect and redirect public resources away from the public. The graft and corruption of political power are no longer needed in a society where voting is sacred and secure and simple. Short term, we should require IQ tests to become politicians. Proposition 346. Term limits only happen when we vote out all incumbents and start fresh with new blood. Putting an end to dictatorships would also need to happen, and those currently in power could be bought out and relinquish control, or become isolated from all global trading and assistance and be banned from partaking in the Olympics. 2 generations is all it would take to see a global society of equals beginning to see how easy it is to flourish when wealth is not hoarded. Proposition 347. Until such time as humanity can truly flourish and people are safe from those who wish to hurt them or steal from them, we should be relying on Big Brother. We are not far off from being able to record most public areas, and AI can assist in reviewing the data as it records to locate instances where police assistance or intervention may be needed. Those found guilty would need to work off their time in exercise facilities that capture the energy of their misdeeds with increased sentences for repeat offenders. Proposition 348. Our future is in jeopardy as long as wars loom on the horizon. We must realize that nobody wins if a single nation strives for world dominance, and we only win as a species when we begin to unite as a species. Only through global cooperation, where nationalism takes a backseat to humanism, might we actually ignite the spark needed to change our planet forever. Otherwise, what we end up igniting might just be the end of all we have worked so hard to achieve. Proposition 349. In order for a living creature to actualize its fullest potential, there needs to be complete moderation across all aspects of their existence. Moderation in all the different chemicals ingested to metabolize the right concentration of elements with each meal can be fine-tuned and adjusted dynamically. Moderation in the amount of eating, sleeping, working, playing, studying, and other aspects of each creature's life is key to reaching one's fullest potentials. Proposition 350. Any organism subjected to an abundance of some aspect of their existence or a deficit in some portion of their life will see genetic changes over time
to deviate the evolutionary path without random mutations coming into play. Evolution is how life adapts to its localized spacetime in its own attempt to flourish and actualize its best potentials.
Proposition 351. We finally have evidence of propositions from long ago that Darwin was partially correct in certain aspects of evolution, but overlooked other more subtle aspects of what evolution does to an organism over an extended period of time. What has been a core accepted principle of the driving force behind genetic change, the nature of random mutations to drive successful lineages, will be overshadowed someday by a more all-inclusive concept of evolutionary trends. Proposition 352. As our ability to capture larger swaths of the night sky in all directions at all different distances continues to increase, hopefully exponentially if we are lucky, we will someday be able to see red transients igniting in sequence caused by an object traversing our local overlapping gravity wells at speeds in excess of our relative speed of light. I propose they are an important key to our finally accepting the nature of space and time and creation, the natural state of nature. Proposition 353. When someday we do find proof of red transients igniting in sequence due to something moving much faster than our speed of light, it not only proves successive collision theory is feasible and likely true, but it also means our entire universe is in fact infinite, and what we call the multiverse does exist. Proposition 354. We can have our universe, and that is all there is, or there can be an infinite number of other patches of localized spacetime supporting galaxies and life. However, there cannot be an arbitrary number in between if space is truly infinite. It is either 1 or it is infinite. It cannot be 2 or 3 or 350 googolplex, but instead becomes infinite as soon as we accept there's mass and energy that exists beyond the area of spacetime created during our Big Bang. Proposition 355. We can leverage our best computer simulations and best supercomputers and quantum computers to see Big Bangs occur when we enhance the resolution great enough to zoom out so far enough that new branches of physics are needed to describe the interactions that occur during the superluminal collisions occurring at our scale factor.
Proposition 356. When our computer simulations adjust for what causes dark energy, and the catalyst that started our Big Bang in motion, then we should be able to extrapolate backwards once we have decent models that almost work to see how dense pockets of mass energy sharing similar relative trajectories and velocities can create larger divots in spacetime, larger gravity wells than would be expected when waves of gravitational attraction in phase see their amplitudes increase exponentially.
Proposition 357. Fixing our understanding of dark energy and properly leveraging the computational tools at our disposal, we can back our way into the formulas to explain the changes needed to the field equations of the general theory of relativity to see how bodies in motion sharing the same relative trajectory and relative velocity can create spherical waves of gravitational attraction that grow stronger due to waves of attraction in phase. Proposition 358. When we change the starting assumption from a hot dense center to see that our cosmic filaments are in fact the leftover trails of superluminal collisions, then nearly all the current mysteries surrounding our prior best attempt to explain our patch of spacetime's creation, the lambda CDM Big Bang model, seems to unravel at our feet very elegantly. No laws of physics are broken when we realize that superluminal collisions are a naturally occurring eternal phenomenon between separate nested successions of co-moving frames of reference that are hundreds of thousands or even millions of nested levels removed from our scale factor. Proposition 359. The nested succession of co-moving frames of reference, pockets of spacetime, that we are a direct part of, includes parent frames of reference beyond our visible patch of spacetime, likely grandparent frames of reference, and maybe even great-grandparent frames of reference, all forged from the same intersecting pockets of spacetime that created all we can see. Our visible patch of spacetime most likely has siblings and cousins, all born around the same time. Proposition 360.
That simple change from the assumption of a hot dense center to the intersecting paths of two immense pockets of nested co-moving frames of reference passing through each other at speeds that would be superluminal relative to the children and grandchildren they left behind helps solve so many separate inconsistencies that currently don't fit together well. Removing the hot dense center from any simulation and using just the data we collected, we can forecast forward, zoom out, and see our past happen elsewhere again and again.
Proposition 361. There are rogue bodies and co-moving groups of bodies of all sizes in nested succession beyond our visible horizon, left behind in the wake as our parent pockets of space-time continued along on their journeys, possibly unfazed by the interaction or possibly changed forever. Many other pockets of space-time besides ours, all sharing common ancestors, could have different starting sizes and densities. Our visible universe might just be the leftover remnants of two dense stellar nurseries passing through each other at 42 times the speed of light.
Proposition 362. Our species likely will never become interstellar travelers because we will likely screw ourselves out of our own future and likely will never even get to colonize many of the different objects inside our own host star system. If we do not put an end to world violence and begin to work together as a single species and begin making global decisions that are in the best interest of the globe, we face mass suffering and mass struggle. We are at a crucial juncture in the evolution of our species, and only by uniting in purpose, in voice, and in action might we ever hope to avoid the pending collapse of society that looms heavier every day. Proposition 363. What is the meaning of life? First and foremost, life is not required to have a purpose. Existence might just be all there is, and complete and random chaos could govern the interactions of all mass and all energy for an eternal period of time. But if we were to attempt to assign such an importance or value to existence itself, what other conclusion could be drawn other than to do all in one's power to see their species prosper and flourish, while also attempting to see the best possible existence for all generations to come, for as many species we come in contact with as possible. Improving the chance for every life form to flourish well into the future is the only meaning I can see that makes sense. Proposition 364. Suppose you were an eternal amount of infinite energy that takes on many forms and is constantly creating all there is through tiny vibrations of yourself. While you realize that parts of you must power suns and collisions and become dirt and slime, you also strive to see as much of yourself get a chance to see, smell, taste, feel, hear, and fornicate as possible for as long a span of time as possible. All life forms experience life, good, bad, or other. While energy powering suns or being a magnetic field for a planet or being the planet itself is a lot less exciting. Life evolves everywhere it can grab a foothold and attempts to flourish everywhere it can.
Proposition 365. Obviously, the first chicken egg came before the first chicken. The definition of what an egg is would be based on the contents, not what produced it. The first chicken came from an egg laid by the insemination from two species that themselves were not quite chickens. The egg that produced the first chicken was not laid by a chicken. So the egg the first chicken was born in came first. A handful of similar mutations during a localized period of time across a localized area of space likely produced other first chickens from non-chickens. And something about those changes offered the species an ability for a new breed of fowl to flourish above other similar lineages. The survival of the fittest is governed by both random mutations and adaptive mutations.
Proposition 366. Earlier, I mentioned that if you traveled in a straight line in any direction for eternity, you would eventually intersect your own DNA. We also discussed that grasping true infinity points to infinite regression as being likely. That means if there are an infinite number of scale factors, and each time you zoom out far enough, we see another periodic table repeat, then if you zoom out for eternity, we are eventually inside a cell that has your DNA. As hard as that is to grasp, if you accept eternal time and infinite space, then it becomes an almost statistical certainty. That is the natural state of nature.